On an unremarkable day before the skirmish, Jean moved and looked thoughtfully at the horizon. He was restless, struggling with boredom. The spears suddenly flew past him, piercing his enemy's chest. He tensed, cursing himself for being distracted for a second. His comrade called out his name, Jean Muin, asking if he was lost in a dream amidst the carnage. Was he exhausted already? The ally stared, confused by Mu's distraction in the chaos of battle. Perhaps fatigue had taken over? Mu merely smirked, finding such questions unworthy of an answer. He drew his sword and charged into battle. Chan unwatched his friend, noting that Mu's behavior never changed. However, after shedding first blood, Mu turned into a ruthless beast, striving to achieve his goal. He knew that the world called people like him Ronin. As a mercenary, he was dubbed Mercenary Ronin. For a moment, Mu looked at his blade and thought that this title would not be his forever. He recalled a popular saying in the trade: Ronin mercenaries cannot escape this life until they pass into the afterlife. Even as a mercenary, it was nearly impossible to free himself. But today he vowed to leave that path. Mu didn't plan to die today. As they say, life is the most valuable treasure in this world. One looked at his comrade and suggested that they drink rice wine later. Mu nodded, suggesting that they bet on who would faint first. Woon grinned at the pale sky and urged his friend to stay alive. Mu turned around, protesting that death was not in his plans. Bursting into the enemy lines from opposite sides, they shouted to each other to guard their flanks. A few hours later, the sky darkened and Mu's sword was thrust into the ground. Raising the blade, he declared that the battle was over. He felt a strange emptiness, as if the farewell to the battle had become boring to him. But then he noticed movement beneath the fallen enemy. Looking closer, he saw Woon crawling out from under the corpses, barely breathing. Mu rushed towards him, screaming for his friend to come to his senses. What would he do if Woon didn't survive? Looking at his hand, he saw that it was stained crimson with the blood of his closest friend. After laying on the ground, unwhispered So-Wa's name. Mu, seeing his friend's eyes open, exclaimed in relief that he had regained consciousness. Woon gasped, pulled a bag of coins out of his pocket, and thrust it into his comrade's hands. With his last breath, Woon begged Mu to take care of So-Wa. Mu watched his friend's fading figure, powerless to save him. After performing the funeral rites, Mu buried his friend in the warrior's cemetery, carving his name on a tablet and fixing it to the ground. Grief-stricken, Mu poured rice wine on a grave, muttering that he had always wanted to drink with him. He cursed, saying that he had had enough. How dare his friend leave him alone to finish the job? As he set out, Mu realized that there was one last task left. Should he take it on or leave? He decided to test his skills by deciding to track her down. Having completed the task, Mu arrived in the city where, according to his information, his friend's daughter lived. The city was modest. Its inhabitants suffered from poverty and wandered through dark alleys. Before nightfall, he surveyed the area, certain that this was the place. Soon, a boy approached him, claiming to know So-Wa. The boy kindly took him to the house, confirming that the woman Mu was looking for lived there. He demanded 15 coins, as agreed, for his service, as their master had promised. Mu, being cautious, insisted that he would check the house himself first. Entering the dilapidated house, he found it almost empty. Dishes and furniture were scattered everywhere. The bed, however, was occupied. A girl lay there, frightened by the sudden intrusion. The girl demanded to know who the stranger was. The boy ran in, claiming it was him. She looked scared and unsure. Mu approached and asked if her name was So-Wa, last name Jang. She confirmed, then countered by asking who he was. Yuk explained to his sister that the man had asked her by name and he had escorted him from the village gate. So-Wa hesitated, not knowing how to answer. She asked if he had come specifically for her. Mu sensed something was wrong when their eyes met. Keeping his cool, Mu handed the boy the promised coins, stating that this was his reward. Left alone with Wa, she pressed him to find out his purpose. Mu said that he was a comrade who worked with her father. He shared that her father's dying wish was for him to find her. Wa, shocked, repeated dying wish, and he was her father's colleague? She pretended to be grieving, claiming that her father was no more. Mu, seeing her tears, almost believed her play. Hua leaned forward, wailing that she had lost her father, her cries echoing with grief. Mu noticed that she looked confused and then asked if she could answer one question. Who is she really? Hua raised her head sharply, trying to grab his sword. No, Mu, anticipating her move, deftly dodged. She didn't expect him to dodge. Her speed was formidable. Mu looked at her and called her ruthless. Realizing that her trick had been discovered, the girl rushed into the attack, intending to eliminate him as quickly as possible. She unleashed a flurry of movements to strike him. Mu realized her formidable skill. A straight strike could split a rock. Undeterred, the girl continued her attack, using sinister and supernatural techniques. She performed a falling kick at third speed. Mu, caught off guard, took the brunt of the crushing blow. Leaning against the wall, he realized this was not a game. He considered drawing his sword, but if he had pulled out of its sheath, the tide of battle would have changed instantly. Before he could do anything, someone struck from behind, breaking the wall of the house. Caught off guard, Mu was knocked to the ground by a counterattack. Turning around, he saw that the boy and the old man had joined the fight. The girl took advantage of the moment and used her technique to accurately strike Mu in the back. Mu turned around, but was unable to dodge as he received a powerful punch to the chest. The old man mocked the girl, calling her Chiel Sao and saying that her skills were too old to waste 3 seconds on someone as insignificant as Mu. Chiel Sao snapped at him, ordering him to be quiet. Had he forgotten the consequences of disobeying her? Mu, bleeding from the blow, recalled Woon's words. Did they make sense? Would he be able to turn the tide and get answers through this ordeal? Mu replied that yes, it can be effective. It allows you to assess what your opponent knows and what he doesn't. But to master this tactic well, one condition is crucial. When asked what it was, Mu said that it required unwavering endurance. When he opened his eyes, a sharp pain exploded in his chest from another blow. The girl loomed over him, declaring that it was her turn to ask questions. Who was he really? He had better answer correctly, otherwise there would be more pain. Mu repeated that he had said that he was a comrade who faced life and death with So-Wa's father, Chang Woon. When Jang Woon was dying, he tasked Mu to find So-Wa. But who were they posing as So-Wa and attacking him? The girl put the blade to his throat, ordering him to be quiet. Only here do they ask questions. She asked how he knew she was not So-Wa. Mu replied that the real So-Wa would have recognized him, but this imposter would not. The old man shouted that this was nonsense. Chang-Un had become a mercenary many years ago, and none of his comrades had ever visited this village. So-Wa couldn't know him either, so his story was a lie. Mu realized that they were hunting for So-Wa too. Annoyed, the girl screamed at him to spill everything about himself and what he knew. He must have some clues about So-Wa's whereabouts, right? Mu countered that if he had such information, would he be stupid enough to barge in here and cause trouble? Mu carefully loosened the ropes, looking at the 2 enemies who were beating him up for answers. He declared that it was time to put an end to this. The old man and the girl, stunned by his valor, became visibly wary. Without wasting any time, Mu rushed at the girl with lightning speed and dealt her such a powerful blow that she almost vomited. The old man took the chance to strike, desperately trying to save himself. No, Mu, anticipating this move, turned around, dodged the attack, and delivered a crushing counter-blow to the man's stomach. The old man, battered and staggering, was surprised that this was only Mu's average skill level, mistaking it for a master's technique. The girl also realized that Mu was not captured. He allowed himself to be captured. Mu approached her and said that he had a question and he would like her to answer it. He added that he did not intend to kill her and would let her go if she did not resist. The girl chuckled, calling a useless gesture and challenging him to finish her off. Mu, taken aback, asked if she really wanted to die. She looked up at him, shouting insults, but suddenly her condition worsened. Her head began to spin as if it was about to burst. Mu, confused, could not understand how she died. His hands did not even touch her. Going outside, Mu decided to run away from the house. But then he noticed a boy lingering at the door. The boy grabbed the weapon he used to kill the girl, admitting that he had caught Mu off guard. Mu replied that he could say the same about him, stunned that someone would so casually kill his ally. Even in their chaotic times, when life had little value, wasn't this too far? The boy warned that Mu, unaware of who he was facing, would regret crossing their path. As the boy's life faded away, Mu thought deeply about what was going on here. Why were the killers targeting his friend's daughter? He needed more answers to find So-Hwa, and fast. Come to think of it, who could be in Luoyang? That night, the undead scout brought grim news to the leader of his sect. The leader, shocked, asked if all three were dead. The scout confirmed that O-Sao, Yuk-Sao, and Chil-Sao were all dead. The leader mused that it looked like they had been ambushed. The scout agreed, noting that the attacker was likely a highly skilled fighter. The one who was looking for So-Hwa was a tall young man, but nothing else was known. It seemed like he used mid-level techniques. The leader noted that his movements were basic, making it difficult to trace his fighting origins. What did he do next? The scout reported that after leaving the slums, the man disappeared without leaving any traces. The leader noted that Savi's men had not even been able to track him down. This man was no ordinary enemy, which could complicate the situation, but perhaps it was a blessing. The servant gave his men the order to continue the pursuit. Of course, he would lead them straight to So-Hwa. Meanwhile, Mu reached Luoyang, arriving at Xian Lu Tower. Unlike its usual splendor, where nature wove into every corner, the city seemed tense. A maid rushed into Mrs. Rowe's room. The lady, startled, asked where she was rushing to and what was wrong. Reported that a guest had arrived, and the captain sent her to tell him. He said that Lady Rowe would have something to say when she saw him. The guest also warned that refusal of entry would entail irreversible consequences. Mrs. Rowe, sensing who it was, hurried into the garden to meet the visitor. Mu greeted her, noting that a long time had passed. Nan Xiang stared at him, too annoyed to respond, her silence filled with resentment. Mu teased, asking why she was hiding her beautiful face behind such an unsightly mask. Were there wrinkles? Nan Hiang countered that she had been wearing it for so long that she had forgotten about it. Mu asked if she would like to take it off. She refused point blank, saying that she cared little whether she looked beautiful in his presence. Mu pretended to be shocked and asked if it was true. He admitted that he was eager to see Nan Hiang's shining face again. Hiang looked into his eyes, feeling a surge of affection and warmth. She objected that it was too much and asked why he looked even younger. Mu would tease her if she was jealous and claim victory if she was. Hiang would playfully push him, retorting that he was still as stupid as ever. She pressed him to find out the purpose of his visit. She had heard of no battles that might interest him. Mu explained that fighting was not his goal. He had given up the mercenary life. Hiang, stunned, asked what he meant. Did he really give up being a mercenary? Mu confirmed, saying that he had one last contract to fulfill, which brought him here. Hiang pointed out that he couldn't remain a mercenary forever. Could he? But he never explained his visit. Mu hesitated and then asked her to help him find a job. Sitting at the table, Mu admitted that he was done with the bloodshed, but he needed income. All he knew was working as a mercenary, which left him with few options. Hiang raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant by speaking so boldly and with such a shameless expression on his face. Mu admitted that the last contract was for quick money. Hiang assumed it was related to Jangwon. He pleaded, emphasizing his importance. Hiang sighed, saying that it would be unfair for him to make such a face. She relented when she saw a recent job posting. With his skills, he was a perfect fit, so she hired him. Mu jumped out of his chair, exclaiming, "Really?" Hugging her, he expressed his gratitude to her, stating that she was the only one he could count on. Hiang pushed him and said she had two conditions to start with. Mu said he would do whatever she asked, as long as it wasn't death. Hiang said that first of all, he shouldn't touch their courtesan's Kiryu. Mu was surprised because his principle was not to stop women coming or going. No, Mu said he wasn't ready for that. No, Hiang got angry and said that a bodyguard was strictly forbidden to touch a courtesan. Never. Mu thought for a moment and said, "Okay, he understands, so what other conditions does she have?" Hyang replied that it wasn't really conditions, but rather a request from her as an employer, and she wants him to investigate a murder case. Mu asked in surprise, a murder case? Wasn't he hired as a bodyguard? Hyang replied that yes, it wasn't exactly what Kiryu's bodyguard needed, but she thought she could trust him with this task, and if he did it right. But Mu interrupted her and said that he understood. He would take on the task, but there was one thing he would like to ask in return. Couldn't she pay part of the bill in advance? He has urgent matters to attend to. Hyang was surprised and asked if he was diagnosed with a fatal disease or something like that. Mu asked her why she was saying this. Hyang replied that just seeing him in such despair made her feel like she had never seen him like this before. Mu thought for a moment and replied that he could tell her that there was something to it. Hyang said that was right, and there must be a reason why he went so far. Hyang didn't talk to him for long and threw the bag of money straight into his hands. And she said she would consider it a deposit for an experienced bodyguard. That should be enough. And as soon as he finishes his urgent business, let him return quickly. Mu took the money, thanked her, and replied that he would return soon. But Hyang saw that the thoughts of the wandering swordsman who had never been bound by anything had suddenly and unexpectedly changed. At this time, the local library was quiet, and the manager was not happy either because it was quiet around him. But suddenly he heard someone coming towards him. Mu entered and asked if Kong Suk-cho was there, as it had been 5 years since they had last seen each other in Sichuan. Sok-su stood up in surprise, looked at the guy, and said that it was him, but he couldn't stand it and started throwing books at him angrily. Mu expected such a greeting and dodged, saying that he was also glad to see him. But Sok-su did not stop there and attacked him. Sok-su continued to strike with great force and could not even stop. But Mu simply defended himself and did not respond. But Su did not stop there and continued to fight him. But Mu did not call him to it and stopped his attack. Su suddenly decided to speak out and said that he thought Mu was dead because contact with him had been lost 6 months ago in Qinghai province. But Mu replied that if he died, did he know how many women would follow him to the grave? So even if he wanted to die, he could not. Su started laughing and said that he thought only his appearance remained the same, but his stupidity remained the same too. Sitting down at the table, Su asked him how he knew he was here. Mu replied that he had once heard from Guak Sam about him in Nanhyang. Su was surprised and asked if he had visited her. Mu replied that yes, he had even gotten a job as a bodyguard at Nanhyang's brothel. Su lost his temper and slammed his hand on the table, saying that after what he did, how dare he go to her? And he got the job. He's crazy. Mu asked him to calm down, and it was all in the past. He didn't force her. It was a mutually beneficial agreement. Su calmed down and said that Nanhyang must have her own reasons for accepting him. How stubborn he is. But Su suspected and asked the boy if he had come to Nakian for him. What kind of bloodshed was he planning? Mu pulled out his sword and said that he was retired. Su did not believe him and asked again, retired? The boy answered that it was correct. But Su started laughing and said that it was a good joke. He couldn't believe that Mu had retired. Mu replied that he didn't even expect the old man to believe him. No, Mu decided to get straight to the point and said that he was looking for 2 things. The first was a girl named So-wa, and the second was the identity of those hunting her. Su thought and asked again, a girl named So-wa? And why is he looking for a child? Mu thought after his question and immediately remembered all the moments before his friend's death. The guy told Su that she was the daughter of his colleague Chong-ung, who died 6 months ago in Qinghai, and he asked him to convey his last words to her and, if possible, to take care of her. This is his last request, his last order. Su said he understood about it, but who is chasing after it? Mu pointed and replied that these are not ordinary guys. These are the guys who take advantage of it. Su took a closer look and asked in surprise, is this Ho Hongak? Where did he get this thing? Mu replied that it was the guys who attacked him, and one of them used So-wa as bait to lure him in. He was quite skilled, but for some reason, they were desperate to find So-wa. And now he needs to find her before they do. And to do that, he needs to know who they are. Su replied that using Ho Hongak, although they're still skilled, they are of course also dangerous. He doesn't care what happens to him, but if he wants to know his opinion, although it actually looks bad, if he is really retired as he said, then ignoring it is the best option. Mu told him that he was right, but the memories of those moments showed him that he was the only one in Nokian who could give him information about them. Su responded to a guy who asked him to find the daughter of his dead colleague, and it looks like he lived too long. And now he could consider that he was being repaid the debt he owed him 8 years ago in the corridor of Heiseo, and he decided that he would help him. Mu was inspired and said that he knew he could count on him, but Su replied that he didn't seem to say he would do it for free, and he needed money. Mu turned around and said that there was no point in talking about money when he was returning a favor. Su replied that he would not have agreed to this request if it weren't for the favor. The guy turned around and said that he already knew that Su would say that, so he got an advance from Nansien. Will that be enough? Su accepted all this and replied that the work and the advance the guy, of course, is a bomb. He will definitely work off this money. Mu turned around after saying that and left, saying that he would wait. After that, he went to Hyang and asked what happened. Hyang replied that a murder had occurred 3 days ago. Yang Dok-gun, the son of a nobleman of Nakiang, and a courtesan named Ibong were killed in a brothel called Sangak-ru. The suspect, a young nobleman named Zhong Meng, was immediately apprehended. He stood at the crime scene, holding a bloody knife in his hand. And the problem now is that he doesn't remember anything. This suspect, Zhong Meng, is the son of his adopted sister who died 3 years ago. He and his sister Sol are like her niece and nephew. He and Sol know that Zhong Mayan would never kill anyone. She fell on her knees before her and begged her to reveal the truth and find the real killer. She could do it, couldn't she? After this conversation, Mu went to Morgbin, Ken Dok's office. He asked if they had received the message from Ju Sil, and now there was a bodyguard investigating the case. The servant replied that yes, and that the master should hurry up. After all, the police were very unhappy about this matter. Mu told him not to worry. Mu started working and said he would finish soon. He opened the body and began to examine it in detail. The servant was shocked because he couldn't watch him touch and examine corpses so casually. And were all mercenaries like that? Mu looked around carefully and at some point noticed something. And he said that the man had finished, and now he wanted to examine the woman. The servant was very surprised and asked the guy if he was going to take care of the woman too. Mu replied that of course. They had 2 victims. He couldn't investigate just one of them. But they usually only do a superficial check. And that's why no one trusts the authorities to investigate. Suddenly Mu noticed something. When suddenly the police burst in and asked who dared to touch the body without permission. The servant immediately became frightened and replied that he knew nothing. The police approached the boy, grabbed him by the hand, and asked what he was doing without permission from the authorities. But Mu was prepared for anything, feeling someone else's hand on his. He immediately grabbed it and turned it over. But Mu did not talk to them for long, but hit them both with his fists and threw them out the door. At that moment, another worker was standing outside the door, and, seeing his friends lying on the ground, he panicked. Suddenly, he felt that someone was standing behind him, and, turning around, he asked the guy how he dared to attack an official. Mu lowered his head and immediately realized that this person was the police chief's man named Yuk Gi. Ji asked the others, "What are they all doing? Let them stand up and arrest this guy immediately." Mu came over and said that he was sorry and didn't know that they were court officials. He introduced himself and said that he was the bodyguard of Mrs. Sukyin-ru, a courtesan. Gi asked in surprise, "Sukyin-ru? He's her bodyguard?" But he has never seen his face. Mu replied that he had recently become her bodyguard and the lady had told him to say hello to her. Goei asked in surprise, was that true? Mu felt that this was awkward and if he treated him badly and upset Han, there might be problems with the monthly payments. And now he decided that he would use her influence here. He said that he was investigating this murder case on Mrs. Ru's orders. And he's ordered to investigate the incident quickly and thoroughly. And according to orders, he must examine the body before it decomposes further. Ji replied that there was a similar procedure. Mu asked him if he was sure about that. If the check dragged on and interfered with the investigation, Mrs. Ru would be extremely unhappy. Ji thought for a moment and told him to do what he wanted. Mu turned around and immediately began to look around. Mu pulled out his sword and said that if it was too disturbing, it was better not to look. He would continue the dissection. Mu cut open one body and suddenly discovered a ring that was so bright and familiar. The next day, Guy came with Mrs. Rue and said that he was sorry, but he didn't know. Mrs. Rue replied that no, it was his fault that she had not warned them in advance. The suspect in the crime was like a nephew to her. It's not that she doesn't trust the court's investigation, but she assumes that he shares her desire for a speedy resolution of the matter. And Warrior Jean is actually a very capable person. He will conduct a fair and fast investigation, so it is better to cooperate with him. And then he handed him a bag of gold coins. Guy replied, exactly. He would ensure full cooperation with the investigation. After a difficult conversation, Hyang was very tired and asked the guy to come into the room. Mu came over and asked my lady what was the matter. Was she going to reward her skilled bodyguard? Hyang hit him and said that she told him not to cause trouble. And he just recently became a bodyguard and already he's causing trouble? But fortunately, it was only Yuk Ji's people. If it had been other officials, he would have been arrested on the spot. Mu replied that they had started it. Xiang told him that he had asked him to behave as before. She had a reputation as the owner of the best brothel in Luoyang. Hyang decided to cut to the chase and asked if he had learned anything from the autopsy. Mu replied that of course he had, but he believes he needs to investigate further. It is too early to say anything. Hyang told him not to tell her that he was doing this to arouse her interest, and she would call a young man right now. Mu replied that there was no need for that. They would do it later. He needed to inspect the crime scene first. He could count on that, right? Xiang replied that Lady Wu was also a member of the Luoyang Courtesan Guild, so it wouldn't be difficult. Mu agreed and offered to visit her right away. And she didn't have to worry, it wouldn't take long. Suddenly, Ok's son came out to them on the street and said that she was here on behalf of Mrs. Rue. Mu was very shocked and thought that this person was a concubine in Chongwun's house. He didn't expect much from such a brothel, but she is amazing, and especially her figure. Sen said she received a message from Nan Hyang. But is there anything else that needs to be investigated? Mu replied that yes, everything was there. After all, there was a man involved in this matter who was like her nephew, and he thought that Mrs. Rowe wanted to do everything possible. Sun replied that yes, she understood. But the stage had been completely renovated, the furniture, plumbing, and even the wallpaper had been replaced, and the trash was thrown into the incinerator. But since today is not trash day, they have to be there. Suddenly, Moon noticed that her gait seemed familiar to him. Sin suddenly turned around and asked, "Is something wrong?" Mu replied that no. And in fact, Lady OK was so charming that he couldn't help but be charmed. So first he would like to inspect the room where the accused and the Confucian scholars gathered, as well as the crime scene. And then he wants to talk to the courtesans and the legions accompanying them. Nomu looked around and looked for something. Nosun looked away slightly and looked at him strangely. When he met courtesans, he personally examined them and assessed their physique and adornment. But then they came to the room, and the girl said that this was the room where Ibon lived. Mu looked and asked what was behind the side door. The courtesan replied that it was an emergency exit. Mu went out to see, looked around, and understood. And he thought that there must be a reason why the woman chose such a remote room. And if he were here, Mu would imagine the full momentum of the attack and how he would act and move in that case. He noticed that the killer was far from the central staircase, so it was possible to know in advance that someone was coming from that side. However, after recreating the attack in front of him, he suggested that the killer could have attacked through the front door. And this gives them time to prepare for an enemy attack. And after they repel the surprise attack, they can easily escape through the emergency exit and window. Mu looked around and thought about everything. And now the only thing left to do was to check. At that moment, the Sun Girl was looking at him through the window. At the time, there was a hostage in the prison, chained to a chair and suspected of murder. Mu came to him and said that the guy had been through a lot. The guy was surprised and asked, "Is this the one his aunt sent?" Mu said yes, and the guard Jean called him. The guy told him to help him. He didn't kill them, and he's innocent. He may have caused trouble for his sister, but he swears he can't even kill a bug. Mu replied that everything was fine. With his eyes, he said that he also believed in his young master's innocence. Mu knew and realized that he had a special ability. He could recognize murderers. After meeting the prisoner, he went to the tavern where all the murderers usually spent their time. When he entered the tavern, he was asked who he was. Mu realized that he saw murderers through his eyes. But suddenly the people turned out to be inhospitable, and one of them immediately attacked him with his fists. But Mu had already analyzed everything in advance and immediately dodged the first blow, counterattacking in response. But the rest did not stand aside and immediately all together attacked him. But Mu was stronger than all of them and easily removed them from his path, knocking them out with one blow. But suddenly one of the oldest men left them and, thanking the great warrior, offered him something in return. Mu asked the old man, did he really think he could deceive him with this? When the old man heard that he had been exposed, he immediately attacked the warrior. Mu had been waiting for this moment and immediately drew his sword and killed the enemy. He realized that his abilities were very useful for his work, and so he was sure that the young master was not a murderer. After listening to the prisoner, Mu said that this was enough. The boy was surprised and asked, is that all? Mu told him not to worry and that there would be good news soon. The prisoner asked what this meant. Was he ending the investigation with one question? And he asks the great warrior to ask more. But Mu did not answer him anything more and simply went about his business. Soon, Hyang listened to him and asked, is the investigation finished yet? Mu replied that he had enough experience and the matter was not difficult. Hyang asked if the young master was really guilty. Mu replied that no, the young master was not guilty. Madame lowered her head after saying this and said that it was a relief to her, and so he would soon be released. Mu replied that if they could prove his innocence, it could happen tomorrow. It wasn't that difficult. Hyang walked up to him and, taking his hand, thanked the guy for his great contribution to this investigation. But then she realized she had gone a little overboard, turned around, and said he had done a great job. Mu replied that there was no problem, but it was not time to relax. This was not a crime of passion, but a power struggle between the Murim forces. Hyang asked in surprise, what does this mean? Yang Do-gun is just a vagabond, isn't he? He has nothing to do with the Murim forces. Mu replied that this was correct. Yang Do-gun and the young master were in the center of the action. Hyang asked what this meant, and did it mean that the target was the courtesan He Bong? Mu replied that yes, and she is no ordinary courtesan. He Bong is part of Murim Man's intelligence service. She is a spy for the Fongren Bun branch. And he found traces of Shua Ok, Su, and Sang Hyo Bo techniques on her body. Both techniques are secret. Her room was also prepared for the intended attack and escape. It was a typical spy hideout. Hyang asked why the spy Murim was in a place like Song Ok Ru. Mu replied that he couldn't understand what Murim Man was thinking. And that's all for today. He'll tell the rest at the court in Luoyang. Xiang was shocked and asked, where's the truth in this case? He has to tell her who the real culprit is. And he already knows everything. Mu replied that yes, he knew everything. But if Murim Man was involved, then this was not just ordinary business. And if he reveals the truth and the culprit of the incident, Su Hyang Ru might be in danger. She doesn't mind, right? And he's just an employee, so if she wants, he can continue. Hyang turned around and replied that she understood. Mu said that of course there are things one needs to know, but sometimes ignorance is the best choice. And she has nothing to worry about, because tomorrow she will definitely find out everything she needs to know. As he entered his room, he felt something and immediately sheathed his sword, saying that the night dew was cold, and it was bad for her beautiful skin, so let her come in quickly. The windows did not open for a long time, when suddenly a gust of strange wind broke the windows and burst into the room. Mu was already prepared for anything and immediately began to fight the enemy. The mercenary said that it seemed that he had not lost his skill, and she was glad to see it. Suddenly, Mu felt a mercenary standing behind her, and she realized that it was the shadow cloud technique. But the guy immediately turned around and parried her attack. But the mercenary was not an easy one, and he was very good with his sword. Mu continued to fend off all of her attacks, and at one point he came very close and struck back. But the mercenary didn't even feel it and tried to pierce him with her sword. But Mu felt it and dodged. But the mercenary dodged in the blink of an eye, rushed at him, threw him onto the bed, and sat on top of him. The mercenary said that when she first saw him, she didn't even recognize him. Did he realize that? But what happened? Where did that old intensity go? Mu replied that it was true, and he almost didn't recognize her during the day. The girl asked, hadn't it been 4 years? She really missed him. The boy replied that he missed Yelon too. The girl told the guy that he understood that she would come, didn't he? Mu hugged her and said that, of course, because she would never forget him. Wouldn't she? Mu turned her over on the bed and said he hardly recognized her. She was even more beautiful than before. After the night, Mu said that she was lying without washing her face, and Lon replied that he was still the same as always. In the morning, Mu said he didn't know she was in Luoyang. Lon replied that she had been here for work for half a year. The boy said it must have been hard for him to be around the old man. The girl said it wasn't at all. He barely had the strength to lift a spoon, so it was even easier. Lon asked him how much he had found out so far. Mu replied that it was an accident, a rigged crime scene, a false accusation, and the criminal history of the Fei Long clan. And she, the key figure in that order. Lon said, impressed as always. And he's going to reveal everything? Mu replied that his mission was only to make a false accusation against Ming. Lon stood up and said that she felt better. But Guy said that the head of the secret Guyu sect, one of the 3 largest intelligence agencies in the martial arts world, wandered into a simple brothel in Luoyang out of curiosity. Lon told him that she could have told him if she had joined the order. Mu said that she knew he wasn't that kind of person, didn't she? The girl replied that it was right. The one who does not belong to anyone wanders around the world of martial arts. And he has always been such a person. But once the truth is revealed, the military alliance will intervene. Then they will have to retreat. But couldn't he make concessions, she asked. Mu said no. Zhang Mian had to be safe so he could get the money from the client. Lon decided to negotiate and said she would pay 10 times more. Mu responded that it was against his code to change clients during the work. Lon asked him if he was serious about that, but Guy replied that it was exactly as he said and the decision would not change. Lon got angry and asked him since when did he start doing such things. Mu replied that since he came to Luoyang, there must have been a reason. But the girl stood her ground and told him that he understood that it was cruel to say such things with such an expression on his face. And thanks to him, the mission he spent half a year on failed. Mu asked if she hated him now. Lon hugged him and replied that she would love to, but he had become even more charming than before. This made her even angrier. The girl decided to say goodbye to him for the last time and said that they would see each other next time. At that time, a trial was taking place in the Luoyang Bureau, and the judge said that from now on, the retrial of the Sun Gakryu murder case would begin. The judge turned to investigator Cho and said that he had stated that there was a real culprit in this case and had requested a retrial. And if it turns out to be unfounded, he will bear the consequences. Investigator Cho replied that, of course, he knew about it. Investigator Cho said that he realized something strange about the case. And after reading the interrogation reports, the officers of Sun Gakryu. On the day of the incident, there were several people near the room where Meng and Gong were, but none of them heard the screams of the victim Yibong. All they heard was young Doke gun screams. And Jiang Mayan was found just 10 seconds after the scream. And despite these unnatural circumstances, because of their love triangle, no one doubted Jiang Mayan's guilt. And that's why he knew he needed to reinvestigate. He hired someone who knew how to get to the bottom of things like this. And now it was his turn. Mu came out in front of the court and introduced himself as the one who was reinvestigating the case. And tell them the truth on behalf of Investigator Cho. The judge was pleased and gave him permission. Mu turned to Mr. Yu and asked if he really didn't remember the event of that day. The boy replied that of course he did. How could he lie about something like that? Mu said he understood. And while he was wandering around the world of martial arts, he heard various knowledge. Among them is knowledge about a certain toxic substance. And there's a poison called Meho. It is a terrible poison that is often used against women. It is colorless, odorless, and after some time becomes undetectable to silver needles. And on the day of the incident, the criminal could have slipped it into Zhang Man's drink, or forced him to inhale it. And when a man is poisoned by macho, he is forced to obey the commands of the one who introduced him. The consultant told the judge that the speaker was right, and the judge told him to continue his story. Mu brought a box with him and said it was time to move on to the next point, and suggested examining the bodies of the victims. And if they look at their bodies, they will see something unusual compared to ordinary murder victims. They need to examine He-Bon's hands and forearms. They are covered in cuts and lacerations. And such wounds occur when a person blocks an attack with his hands. These are the so-called defensive wounds. On the other hand, there are no defensive wounds on Do-gun's body. From this, we can conclude that He-Ba was trained in martial arts, so he was able to repel the criminal resistance. And the wounds on the bodies are also unusual, and the demonstration can clarify the situation. When an untrained person tries to cut something with a sharp blade, he will not make clean cuts, and they don't know how to apply the right force or technique, so the wounds are jagged and ragged. But when someone like him, trained in martial arts, swings a blade, the wounds are clean and precise from start to finish, as well as the wounds on the two bodies. The judge stood up and understood what this meant, but Mu had already told him that it was correct. And this is a case of a complicated love triangle, and an incident involving a martial artist. In other words, this is a matter that requires the intervention of a fighting alliance. However, as turmoil grew at home and abroad, the royal family's power gradually weakened. On the contrary, the power of this fighting alliance grew stronger and stronger, and soon they became responsible for security in areas where government authority did not extend. And so the conflict between the government and the military alliance began. It was only a matter of time before they clashed. Eventually, to prevent this, the militant alliance and the government signed an agreement. The Wuhan Agreement, concluded in Wuhan, Hubei province, where the military alliance is headquartered, gives martial artists the power to investigate and punish incidents between themselves, an unpleasant thing, but a martial artist's job. The judge told him that this statement was indeed true, and it was an indisputable fact. He-Bong and young Master Yang have more than 80 wounds. With the strength of a bone wound, only those who have master martial arts can inflict dozens of sharp cuts. Mu said that Zhong Ming, who had never practiced martial arts, would not be able to do this. Here's another piece of evidence. This is the weapon that young man was holding during the incident. It is believed that it was used in the crime. And as the judge sees it, it is an ordinary kitchen knife. If such a knife were used to cut bones, the blade would inevitably be damaged. And on the rib of High God, there is a wound from a blade strike. This is a wound caused by the tip of a knife, which cannot be caused by an ordinary kitchen knife. And the criminal treated the wound, but could not erase all the traces. When they collected all the evidence together, it turns out that the criminal is a man who is proficient in martial arts and uses weapons with a sharp tip. And this man killed He-Bong and young Master Yang, and then rigged the crime scene and the evidence, blaming Zhong Man for all the crimes. The judge realized that the report that Zhong Ming was not the culprit had not been sent to the authorities. So he asked if he had found out who the real culprit was. Suddenly, the old man asked the investigator why he was looking at him like that. Cho replied that he thought Lu Zhu was involved, but he didn't think he was directly involved in the incident. But the involvement of the courtesans from Song Ok Ru is obvious, according to the truth that Jin's escort revealed earlier. And if it weren't for the cooperation of the courtesans who served Zhong Ming at that time, if they hadn't pumped him full of drugs and portrayed him as a criminal, Cho said that this meant that in addition to the real culprit, there must be another accomplice among the courtesans. The old man replied that it was only their suspicion, and Cho said that he would send guards to see an OKRU this morning. Suddenly, guards appeared and ordered them to open the doors. But, starting with the manager, Sun OK, for courtesans and 6 maids had disappeared, and only 11 people, although the real culprit has not yet been caught. It is already clear that this is not just a love triangle. And this case concerns a serious conspiracy involving a military alliance. He proposes that they cooperate immediately to track down the real culprit. The judge was shocked, and wondered why he was hesitating. After all, there were so many eyes watching him now. The judge thought for a moment and said that he had made his decision. Since Jiang Man's innocence had been proven, he would be acquitted immediately. The next day in Luoyang Jinping, the lady was resting in her room. Suddenly, a servant came in unexpectedly and spoke to the lady. The girl said that the previous operation was completed, all traces were erased. No one would be able to track them. The lady replied that it was a good job. The servant asked her if everything was really all right. What if something goes wrong before they get a response from higher-ups and something terrible happens? The lady replied that there was no need to worry about that, and she should just give it to the master. The servant suddenly said to the mistress, in order to avoid future troubles, should the man who came to the brothel last time be killed? The owner couldn't help but laugh. She said, a puppy who knows no fear of a tiger. That's what he looks like. Let her stop. Even in the secret command, only a few know his true identity. Does she know why? This is because no one who fought him survived. After completing the task, Mu was rewarded with gold coins. Mu was surprised and asked why she was so kind to him. The maid replied that he had saved their Min's life. She feels that this is not enough and does not know how to express my gratitude. Besides, if the great martial artist doesn't mind, then at any time. Mu has already prepared and introduced Lady Ru. But Lady Ru was so angry that she told him to take the payment and put an end to it all. Hyang said he becomes such a pervert every time his back is raised. Mu replied that it was the only color under the sky that he could create when the flowers first came to him. Hyang, of course, asked in surprise, why did she have to choose this nickname out of all the others? How could she do this to Sol, who is like her niece? And he knows that she never stops anyone, so why behave like that? Mu immediately left and said that he was leaving. But Hyang replied that he only called her Lady Ru at times like this. At that moment, Mu headed to his room as he felt something strange on the way. And to avoid death, he immediately grabbed his blade to be on guard. And he realized that someone had entered his room. Mu immediately realized that this was not Solon, but the energy of a person trained in martial arts. But suddenly lightning flashed in front of him, which he himself did not expect, and a man appeared from the shadows. The stranger asked the boy why he was in such a hurry. Shouldn't good tea be drunk slowly? Mu replied that he did not remember inviting the man into his room to serve him tea. But the guy felt that the stranger was hiding it, but he had a lot of inner energy. But who is he? The stranger told the guy not to be so hostile. He just came to chat. And if he openly enters the courtesan's house, his wife will find out and he will be in great trouble. Mu asked him if he was afraid of his wife. The stranger replied that he adored his wife. However, belatedly, people called him the golden deity Unri, Jushin Ian. Ian told the boy that he probably already knew. Mu asked if he knew. The boy was surprised and asked what? Ian told the boy that he didn't know the golden deity Unri, the leader of the loyalist wing of the Fighting Alliance. But Mu asked, then does that mean the leader of the loyalist department breaks into someone else's room and steals tea? Ian replied that he stole it, no matter. It seemed like it would take a long time. He heard that this guy had cleared Jiang Man's name. And since he revealed the truth about this murder, he must also know about the real culprit. And does he know the true motive and the true culprit of this murder? Mu thought, didn't the Pun Ruin clan tell the Luoyang branch anything? And then he replied that he didn't know. Ian asked the boy if it was true. Mu replied that the government had sent an official request to the military alliance. So if he had any questions, let him ask. Ian says they don't know more about the incident than he does. He can't even imagine that they know more than this guy. What if he was hiding something that he wanted to force out of him? Mu immediately decided to prepare himself and grab the sword. But Ian told him to forget about it. He just came to him today, treating the golden deity Unri as a simple citizen. He loved him very much, and they would see each other again soon. Mu told him at last that he really didn't know who this man was talking about. When Chunchu Mu came to the writing room, he asked Su if he had found it. Su replied that they would drink first. After a few glasses, Mu was surprised and asked if he was really sharing such a fine wine, and on what occasion. Su replied that it should be at least as good, and that the scent of blood he would smell should be overwhelming. Mu asked him, is he saying there will be bloodshed? Looking in the mirror, he saw his reflection. But raising his glass, he said that the bloodshed was nothing new and that it was worth telling by now. Su replied that he had found Jiang So-hwa. Su said that she was in an abandoned shrine to the east of Mount Huiji. She was with an old man who seemed to be serving her. Mu was surprised and said that he found her faster than he thought. Su replied that he was able to track her down because she had recently passed through Luoyang. Mu stood up and said he would go right away. But Su asked him if he had heard of the Blood Snake Society, and they were looking for Jiang So-hwa. Mu replied that of course he hadn't heard, and even deep down he didn't know what kind of people these people really were. As he set out, he remembered what Su had said earlier, that even he must have heard of the Azura blood cult. 6 years ago, the leader of the Blood Snake Society had changed. It is said that he also uses the martial arts of the Bloody Azura cult. And the Bloody Azura cult is the last sect that used the horn of Hohan and the Black Heart Blade until recently. Mu was shocked and had to find an old shrine on a mountain full of graves. But suddenly on his way, he saw those very graves. But he saw that there were several more people running in front of him, and he said that the problem was solved. The boys walked through the forest and stopped right in front of the house that Su had spoken about earlier. The elder told his people that they needed to go in. Mu also went in and asked, so she was really there? The mercenary turned around and was shocked that he didn't even feel the stranger next to him. The guy immediately pounced on him and asked who he was. And a moment later, he dealt a strong blow. Mu replied that he was a bodyguard from the House of Courtesans. He took advantage of this moment and repelled the boy's attack. Without wasting any time, he immediately delivered a powerful kick straight into the opponent's chest, leaving him no chance. But the rest of the mercenaries also saw that the stranger had come with them, and they went on the attack. But Mu wasn't even afraid of this, and with a wave of his hand, he easily repelled the attack of one of them. But Mu decided to leave no one alive and made sure to eliminate every mercenary. Having finished with all the mercenaries, he raised his hat and said that this was the end, and he saw that the door to the house was open. But when he entered, he saw a man sitting on the floor. But he was so emaciated that all the bones of his body were visible. Mu turned to So-hwa and said that if she was still alive, she should come out. After all, he had seen her hiding under the blanket. So-hwa showed up and asked who he was. Mu saw that it was the girl he was looking for and replied that he was her father's comrade. Suddenly, after the guy entered the house, a man with his team unexpectedly approached the scene. The guy in a mask said he was a little late, and some of the bloody killers have already fallen to this guy. He is not just an enemy. He immediately ordered his warriors to use any means necessary to kill him immediately, and their priority is to protect the Chong So flower. Mu introduced himself to the girl so that she would not be afraid, but the girl said his name and called him Uncle Mu. Mu asked her if she knew him. Hwa replied that her father had told her a lot about him in his letters. Mu immediately noticed that this child was very talkative, but suddenly Hwa began to slowly fall with her eyes closed. Mu immediately grabbed her and saw that her body was very weak, and such difficulties for a small child are very terrible. But suddenly the guy turned around and felt that he was not alone here, and they would continue the conversation later. Mu tied her to his back and said that they were invaded by a stranger, and he prepared to fight them. But the mercenaries did not stay away for long, and one of them destroyed the roof of the house and immediately attacked them. Mu reacted in time and blocked the enemy's first attack with his sword. He broke his sword into 2 pieces, but he was followed by the rest of the mercenaries, who were already prepared and understood their task. But the Mu decided not to leave them alive, as they would follow them and find out where their home was. But he immediately attacked one of them from the air, and when the mercenary attacked, he fell with both feet right on his arm and broke it. And after that, he put his sword in front of his face, and then immediately, using his legs, he struck the enemy on the head. Finally, Mu told them to choose their opponent more carefully. After that, he also approached the old man. The boy told him that he had worked hard to protect Hwa, and now he could leave it to him, and then he could rest easy. But when he came out of the door, he saw that he was trapped, and the mercenaries tried to tie him up. But Mu was not afraid of this, and immediately began to swing his sword and break the net into small pieces. The mercenary did not expect such a turn of events, as he did not believe that it would happen like this and that their trap would be easily destroyed. Then the next mercenary threw arrows at him that were supposed to paralyze him. But Mu turned around and began to reflect everything. Stopping one of them, he asked if he knew who he was dealing with. Using the power of the air, he attacked his opponent. Suddenly Mu rejoiced, for he saw that it was all over. But suddenly he saw a sword at his throat and immediately turned around. After doing a small somersault, he thought, "What kind of disguise is this? A normal person wouldn't even notice." But the mercenary didn't stop there and continued to attack in different ways, and Mu continued to dodge. The mercenary wondered if he had blocked his attack. And no, he could see through his disguise. But the mercenary decided to act differently and attack the guy from behind. But Mu turned around and shot him right in the shoulder. The mercenary grabbed his hand and asked how he could see his technique. Mu replied that he had encountered a stealth technique far superior to his. The mercenary said that this was indeed a man with such incredible martial arts skills that even all 10 bloody assassins together would not be able to stand against him. And he admits that attacking him was his mistake. They recognize the damage they've done, so they'll leave it at that. Mu asked the mercenary if he knew that this was nonsense. They started this fight, but it is not up to them to decide when it will end. But the mercenary realized that he could be easily killed and asked to listen to him first. He doesn't know something about this situation, but Mu decided not to leave him alone and brought his sword to his face. The mercenary was frightened and said that his name was Changwook, and he was the head of a bloody clan of assassins. Brother Changwon and Uncle So-Wa. Let the boy let go of his sword and listen to what he has to say. Mu remembered that scoundrel Changwon had talked about So-Wa, but he had never mentioned his family connections. But in other words, it's not something he should care about. Mu asked him what he wanted. Un was surprised and asked what. Mu attacked the guy and replied that Jang Un asked him to protect So-Wa. Whatever he was to her, if he interfered with his request, he would simply destroy him. Vuk immediately grabbed his sword and shouted at the child to stop. And he realized that this was his child. Mu told So-Wa to be patient a little longer. Wook defended himself and asked him to stop. But she didn't understand why he was doing this. And he's not even So-Wa's blood relative. And there's no need for him to be. Mu replied that it was true, he wasn't her blood relative. Mu raised his sword into the air and immediately attacked the enemy with the first attack, leaving him no chance. Vuk was shocked and didn't understand why he didn't come. But Mu said that the mercenary was running on an errand. Is there anything else needed? And he looked at the girl and said that this guy was her uncle. And then he saw her pass out. Mu begged her not to die. In the end, he couldn't find her to bury. After all this, the chief arrived on the scene and told Bodhiyuku that he had disappointed him again. If he didn't want to die so meaninglessly, he should have reported that Jinmu and was the one who killed the 3 members of the bloody sect in the slums. And he knew that Un was on the East Coast, but to see him here. But why did Mu take So-Wa? Mu took her to his room and gave her a bed to rest. But suddenly Hyang came in and asked how she was. The girl looked and asked, "Isn't she his friend's daughter?" Mu said yes. Thanks to the doctor she called, she felt much better. Hyang said that according to her information, it is not free. She will charge him for it. Mu replied that no problem, he didn't plan to remain in debt for long anyway. Hyang was surprised and asked in amazement, what? Mu replied that this child was being hunted. They probably wouldn't give up so easily. And if So-Wa stays here, Su Hyang Pavilion might be in danger. He needs to go somewhere else before that happens. But Hyang told the guy that he seemed to be underestimating her. She was the owner who made Suyong Pavilion the best brothel in Nakeyang. He thinks she won it in some gambling den? She fought off countless rivals who envied her. And he even made government officials and those in power his allies for its construction. And what does he think? Someone would dare to invade her Sukyan Pavilion and even kidnap a little girl. And let the enemy try it if he dares. He will regret it. And besides, no matter what happens, he will protect the child, won't he? Mu said that this was too much. But Hyang replied that she didn't expect him to be able to find a decent place for a girl. And let him not even think about going somewhere and taking good care of the child. She already has plenty of work for the future. Mu answered the mistress that he understood. Hyang told the boy that his skills were too valuable to waste on being a bodyguard at a brothel. How about a part-time job, like a bounty hunter or a mercenary? Mu asked in surprise. Part-time? Hyang asked him what he thought of raising a child for free. He said he needed money, right? With a baby on his hands, he'll need more, won't he? But it's not all blood and guts. If he works in their Sukyan pavilion, where all sorts of people come and go, there will be no shortage of work. Mu replied that he would think about it. But Hyang said that she would wait for a good answer. So I could stay here for a while. Mu approached the child's body and said that he was not married and even had a child. But at that moment, a strange energy passed through Wa's body. Suddenly, after a few hours, Wa regained consciousness and opened her eyes. But she did not understand where she was. Mu saw this and asked, "Is she awake yet?" But now she is safe, so she can relax. Wa immediately stood up and wanted to thank the master. No, Mu replied that she shouldn't force herself. She barely survived. But Mu decided to talk to her and said that she had many questions for her. But would she be able to answer them? Wa wasn't surprised and just kept quiet. No, Mu asked her why the killers were after her. Changwon never said she would be in this situation. Wa replied that she had made a big mistake. Her uncle had been chasing her and her father, trying to catch them. And her father had left her in the care of her teacher. He thought he could protect her that way. Mu thought about it and asked in surprise, a mistake? And what mistake could make him pursue her so desperately? Wa replied that she had let her uncle know about her abilities. And when she touches an object, she can read information about the person it belonged to. But Mu didn't believe anything at all and asked her what kind of nonsense this was. But Wa was shocked that he didn't even believe her. Wa said she knew it was hard to believe, but it was true. Her father knew about her ability. He told her never to tell anyone. But 4 years ago, she was too young and mistakenly told her uncle about her abilities. That day, he grabbed her hands and dragged her along with him. And he brought her to a very strange man. Her uncle tried to take her to a very scary man. Her father took her and ran away. He left her with an old servant and sent her away. And so, running away from her uncle, she accidentally touched his thing. And then she made all this way here. Mu said that she wanted to say that Changwon came to Qinghai to meet him and her. But honestly, it's hard to believe. But if what this guy says is true, I suddenly remembered what my friend said about the dark soul. Mu thought for a moment and told the girl that he would ask her one thing. Her father had told him before he died that she knew about the dark soul. It's a secret that no one in the world knows except him. He never told her father about it. But nevertheless, Chana knew about it. And did she really know it because of her ability? But then what was that thing she touched? Let him show. Wa replied that there was something before that she wanted to confirm. Mu was surprised and asked, confirm? And what does she mean? Wa asked him if he was going to continue to fulfill her father's request. Mu sighed and replied, what a brave child she was. If she really saw her memories, she would know what kind of person he was. And to take something away from a little girl like her, as easy as breathing, and knowing this, she dares to test him? Wa replies that she actually knows how scary he is. But she still knows he wouldn't do that. With a little kid like her, he's very good at talking. Mu said he would say it again. If her ability was real, she should be able to see beyond the dark soul. That would be possible, right? Wa replied that with such a body, she would not be able to go beyond her capabilities. It would require a lot of energy. But once her body is restored, she can begin. And give him the words in this case. Mu thought and said that he would definitely fulfill her father's request. And now he understood why he was looking for her. After all, having spent his entire life as a mercenary and wanderer, there is no point in him caring about Wa just because she is the daughter of his comrade. And that's why everyone who knows him is puzzled. He hoped that Wa's ability to recognize the dark soul was real, so he searched for it. But certainly not for such a trivial reason as loyalty to a comrade. But Mu told her that if all this was a lie, she should not think that he would be lenient with her just because she was a child. After all, she still has to pay for her lie. Kva was frightened by his words and began to cry. But Mu realized that he had gone too far with his threats, and now he could not call himself a normal adult. But there's nothing to be done. This is how he lives, and this is the only way he knows how to behave. But suddenly Hua says that he is the only one she could trust now. But Mu realized that he was no longer a mercenary, and so he told her that if she kept her promise, he would protect her even if it cost him his life. He thought that by saying this he could apologize to her. Hua cried even more and thanked her master. Hua suddenly pulled out an object from her bag and said that it was the object from which she was reading his memories. Mu asked her where she got it. She bought it from a traveling merchant who sold goods on the street. Mu told her that if she could read memories, then she should have seen the person who gave her those memories. Hua replied that it was true and she had seen her. She was a very beautiful woman. Mu listened to her and said that this once again confirmed her abilities. Luoyang is a very strange city, and the memories of old friends are scattered like this. After that, he came to Liji Hyang. She asked him if the conversation with the child went well. Mu replied that he did, and he knew everything he wanted to know. Hyang listened and asked him if he had been rude to her. Mu suddenly replied that he wanted to ask her something. Hyang asked her, why suddenly? Mu said Dan Riyun's name and said that he meant her. Doesn't Hyang know if she is currently in the Zhongzhong estate? Hyang asked him why he was suddenly asking about her. Mu replied that he was just curious, that's all. Hyang immediately thought of cheating and said that they used to be inseparable, but now he doesn't even know where he is. But Mu didn't answer because he really didn't know. But Hyang asked him again, did he really not know? And he was just incredible. Mu suddenly conspired and asked her why she was paying attention to a woman who was nowhere to be seen. But Hyang said she knew, and that's what made it all so weird. Why was she suddenly so interested in someone who was no longer there? Mu looked away and replied that there was no reason, and that was the truth. And he hadn't planned anything. He was just curious. But Hyang said she didn't believe him because she had known him for a long time. But if he was so curious, she could tell him, and he would still find out on his own if he wanted to. Hyang said that Dan Riyun was from the Yungyung clan. Mu was shocked when he heard this and realized what it meant. Hyang continued and said that if the daughter of the fallen Dan Ri clan is in the number 1 Zhongzhong clan in Hanam, isn't it obvious why? And Dan Riyun became the concubine of the young lord of the Zhongzhong clan, Mu Guangsam. 8 years have passed. Mu was shocked and couldn't digest it all. He asked in surprise, concubine? But she couldn't believe it and said that even if her family collapsed, Yun was the most beautiful woman in Gamsa province. How could she become someone's concubine? Hyang asked him what he thought. By becoming a concubine of the Zhongzhong clan, the Danri clan was able to restore its position and join the 5 great clans of Gamsuk. And that's the whole point of political marriages, isn't it? Not everyone can live like him, free to float with the flow like a cloud. Mu asked if she was okay, but Hyang told him that he was acting very strange. Why was he so interested in her today? Mu replied that he had his reasons. Because he gave it to her, and somehow she found her way back to him. Hyang looked shocked and asked, he gave her the black shadow pearl, and now she's here. But how did this happen? Mu replied that Soa had it. She said that she bought it from a traveling vendor at the market. Hyang said that's why he was asking about Dan Riyun. But how did she end up with a traveling merchant? Mu replied that when a person gives someone a black pearl, it means that he has the right to make a request of him, and such a thing should not just be sold on the market. Hyang said that she used to receive occasional news from her, but about 6 months ago, all contact was cut off. And since then, no one from the Zhongzhong clan has said a word about her. It's as if they issued a restraining order. Mu thought about it and asked if there was a way to find out what was going on in the clan. Did she happen to know anyone with connections there? Hyang replied that she was not a know-it-all. Maybe Suk-jo could help. Mu replied that no one knew how much he would charge for it. But the girl told him to stop being such a miser. And there's a way to find out. Mu didn't believe her and asked her if she was lying. Hyang replied that she was also curious. Why would she give the black shadow pearl to someone outside her clan? Mu was so excited that he even hugged her and told her that he was grateful to her and that she was amazing. But Hyang heard his words and knew that he should thank her properly, not just with words. Mu asked her what she meant. Hyang replied that there is nothing free in this world, and he gives something to get something, and he simply agreed to her second request. Mu did not refuse and replied that she was such a miser. Suddenly, guests came to the clan, and the girl informed the head of the clan that the deputy commander of the patrol squad, Nam Jae, had arrived from the Alliance. The clan leader met them and said that she did not expect them to come in person. But right now, Nam Jae, the deputy commander of the patrol squad, also known as the Bloody Tiger Fawn, Ju looked at the clan leader and said that she had forgotten how much the Alliance Master had invested in this. Ju replied that of course not. Jae tells her that the higher-ups want to know why she quit Song Gakuryu so easily. If her explanation is not convincing, she will be punished. Ju replied that she would accept punishment if she deserved it. The servant at this point realized that the patrol squad and Guyu's secret order were intelligence and surveillance services. Deputy Commander Nam uses this incident to try to weaken the authority of Guyu's secret order. Jae started yelling at her and demanded that she tell them why she decided to leave Sun Gakuru. The Jiu clan chief told him that the sect was the cause of the calamity of the Dark Soul, and he asked the commander if he remembered them. Jae replied that it was a group that disappeared after the Great 10 Martyrs were destroyed on the battlefield 15 years ago. But why mention that name now? Ju replied that after the Dark Soul catastrophe sect disappeared along with the 3,000 martyrs and 2 evil incarnations, the Alliance Master ordered them to avoid conflict with the remaining sect members at all costs. Jae says that she means that the decision to leave Sun Gakuru is related to the Dark Soul sect. Ju replied that, unfortunately, yes. And what's more, the military alliance had just dispatched Lord Sam, Y, and the 5 hidden dragons to investigate Song Gakuryu's case. And the military alliance clearly takes this very seriously. If she hadn't made a quick decision to back down, they'd be at odds with them right now, and risking not only Guyu's secret order, but also the entire Sun and Moon Alliance. She believes that the leader of the alliance will consider her decision correct. But suddenly Jae didn't believe it and said, "What a ridiculous excuse. She must be desperate to use something so far-fetched as an example." But Sayu responded that whether they believed her or not did not change the facts. What was important was that the shadow of a ghost hung over the incident, and she had drawn the right conclusion. But Jae told her to shut up, and by making up unprovable accusations, she only increases her guilt. And now he orders her to be arrested right now and brought to the master of the alliance. Let her immediately gather her men and send them to the head, and he will seize her personally. Ju saw that they weren't going to talk and asked, why did they choose this course of action? After her words, she waved her hand to her people to finish off the guards of this dirty bastard. Ju attacked the commander and told him how dare he show his arrogance while obeying Guyu's order. Ju put her sword to his throat and asked if he could walk away unharmed after that. Ju asked since when does the deputy decide whether what she said is true? She even wondered who gave him that authority. Or maybe he was just so confident in his abilities that Jae realized there was nothing more he could do after that, so he just kept quiet. But Ju turned around and said that she apologized, and Lord Yang should have read her report by now. And even if the deputy had simply conveyed her words, he would have had nothing to blame her for. Jae replied that even if problems arise after this, he will take full responsibility, and Madame Ju's arrogance will only make life difficult for their leader. Madame Ju turned around and said to the commander, "What a chatterbox he is. Isn't he the Lord of Justice?" And she didn't know he cared so much about their leader. Jae said that one day they would have to pay for their arrogance, no matter how bright the flower was. And it never blooms for more than 10 days. Ju told the maid that now she looked as if she had crossed the line. The girl replied that it was not that. She just thought that if she treated him so coldly, he would probably come back and start spreading rumors. Ju said let him do it. That worthless chatterbox couldn't do more. And if they dared cross the line, she would do to them what she had done to them today. But still, dealing with people like him was so tiring. And she thought that maybe she should visit this man tonight. At this time, Mu was present at the examination of the girl. The best doctor came and examined Manhwa. The doctor said he had done everything he could to follow the instructions, but recovery was slow, and they will need time to recover their strength. Mu suddenly looked at her and asked why she looked so depressed. Manhwa replied that she just wanted to get better quickly so she could help him, but she was still so weak. Mu saw that she was very sad and told her not to talk nonsense, and let her forget about everything else and focus on resting. That way she could help more. Hua cried and asked to be forgiven for being born weak. No, Mu replied that if she was afraid that someone would come for her, then she should not waste her energy. And those uncles and members of the bloody temple who were behind her, they are all dead, and he killed them. And now that he thought about it, if her uncle was the head of some bloody temple, her family must have been very powerful. Hua replied that her family were direct descendants of the Azura blood sect that was destroyed 30 years ago. Mu grabbed his head and said, "Things are getting even more confusing. The Azura blood sect was notorious for its witchcraft and techniques. It was an openly heretical sect, and leadership was passed down through women. This explains the child's unusual abilities and nervousness. No wonder she is so nervous." And the Azura blood sect was the main target of the Fighting Alliance during the Great Military Upheaval. If the child turns out to be a descendant of the Azura blood sect, and the Military Alliance will hunt her down, and anyone who defends her will also be marked for death. And this is not something to be taken lightly. If he were to resign, the best option would be to ignore it. And now he realized that Sukcho was right. He got himself into trouble that he created. But he knows that Hua is worried, Mu said. And so, she needs to focus on rest and recovery. Don't worry, whoever comes after her will protect her. Hua cried at these words and thanked her uncle. Mu said that she was a smart child, but she thought too much. Now he's talking to Ru and asking if she can help with a little task. Hua was overjoyed, thanked her, and promised that she would do her best. Mu replied that, of course, she would make a full recovery. Suddenly, he remembered and said that if her real name became known, it would cause problems, and it would be better to give her a new name. After thinking, he decided that she would now be Jean Soso, and she would be his niece. The girl smiled at her new name and was happy. When she came to Mrs. Ru's house, she asked how the child was. Mu replied that she was recovering slowly. It would take her a long time to regain her strength. Ms. Hyang says it's quite funny to watch, and she sees Mu playing the role of a parent. Mu became angry and replied that an unmarried girl had told him about it. Hyang said that it was okay to let her stay until she got better. And Sukyang's pavilion wasn't so small that they couldn't accommodate one child. Suddenly, she asked Mu if he was still interested in knowing about a Yun. The guy replied that, of course, and asked her why she was asking. Hyang replied that things had been tense in the Sama clan lately, and that the prodigy Sama Hui, who was the most talented in the clan, had been in a military alliance, but had recently returned, if rumors were to be believed. Hyang asked the boy if he knew him. Mu tilted his head to the side at that moment and pretended not to understand who she was talking about. Mu realized that this was a disaster, and he was the only one who thought that it couldn't get any worse. And why should he go back now? Mu said he didn't know who she was talking about, but Xiang thought it was very strange that he looked away from her, and she knew he was lying. Hyang came up behind him and asked if he was sure. Mu immediately replied that he thought he had heard of him before. Hyang said that this child is known as the Azure Dragon of Heaven, one of the 10 martial arts masters. Mu asked if he was too old to be called a child. The lady replied that she had heard that he was 24. But how did he know that? Mu said that they do not prohibit teenagers from joining the top 10 masters. And anyway, they know that the Sama clan is up to something, and they suggested that she focus on the request. Hyang replied that this is exactly what she wanted, and the customer for this work is Georgina. If he is a member of the 7 colors of cultivation, doesn't he have a bodyguard? If it is a question of asking for one, can't he just ask for one? But of course, the point is that it is a question of a bodyguard. Mu laughed and asked if he had forgotten his job and was trying to hit on Georgina. Dealing with guys like that was his specialty. Hyang said that was not the point. He thought all men were like him. Mu said he doubted Nian Hyang would accept it. So what was the matter? Hyang replied that he would learn directly from her, anything she could tell him, and if he followed her request, he would gain information about the inner workings of the Sama clan. Georgina would see to it that he was well rewarded. Mu listened to her words and went about his business. But on the way he thought, why did Hyang build such a high Xianlu tower? Guests will fall just trying to get here. When he reached the very top, he saw a huge door and realized that Georgina was here. Mu opened the door and immediately introduced herself. But suddenly, in an instant, he saw a fist in front of his face and immediately pushed her away. The warrior in the room did not want to stop and continued to strike senselessly, which Mu defended himself from. Mu said that he heard that the 7 colors of Xian Lu are almost impossible to find, and he didn't expect that it was really true. Mu didn't bother with him for long, and then, using an ice strike, slashed the guy and injured his body. The boy realized that he couldn't dodge or even block it. But suddenly, at one point, Mu stopped in front of his attack. Mu told the guy that he had decent skills, but he was too open, and the guy replied that he himself did not expect to be appreciated in return. The guy introduced himself and said that his name was Vai Min Shin and that he was Dahlia's bodyguard. And he apologizes to the Lord for the sudden attack. There is a reason for that. Mu replies that he is not interested in pleasantries. And frankly, it irritates him. Suddenly, Mu asked the boy what he said to Vai Min Shin. He came here to deal with something he couldn't deal with. Is this such a trick? But suddenly Georgina came in and told him not to blame V's bodyguard. She gave the order herself. The girl introduced herself, said her name was Georgina, and suggested not to escalate the situation. In the end, she had to see for herself if he was up to the job. It was an extremely dangerous job, and only someone with exceptional skills could handle it. And since she had never met Jin Ho Vai before, she needed to test his skills. Mu replied that if that was the case, he wouldn't argue. Meshin was surprised that this guy became polite so quickly, and it was certainly incredible. But his martial arts were no joke. After all, he was more than capable of messing with someone like him. Mu remembered what Hyang had said about how if he were to appear before Dahlia, he should know what would happen. These words frightened him, and he said that his name was Mu and his bodyguard. Georgina replied that she understood everything, and she apologizes again for the way he was treated. And to make amends, she makes him some nice tea. And they could drink tea and start talking. Sitting down at the table, Georgina said that she heard about the murder case at the Sung OK Pavilion. And Mr. Mu cleared the name of an innocent man. Mu didn't talk for long and asked her if she could spare him the idle talk. More importantly, what kind of work required testing his skills. And it was time to get to the point. Georgina says yes, and that's exactly what they're going to do. She asks him to understand that this matter is incredibly important to her and V's bodyguard. And if this is not resolved, she will be forced into an unwanted marriage. Mu understood and asked her to continue. Georgina said that her real name is Gok Unsol, and she is a descendant of the Gok family who practices martial arts. And for over a century, the Gok family ran a small martial arts school in Luoyang. But after her father, Gok, lost a duel to a traveling swordsman, the family's fortunes began to crumble. Her father suffered ridicule and contempt from Loya's martial arts masters, and all of his students left. After that, he tried everything to revive the family, but nothing worked. And 3 years ago, her father borrowed a large sum of money from a man named Jin Jun-hee. But in the end, he couldn't save his family. Her father died because the internal trauma from sparring came back to haunt him. And even when her mother fell ill, in order to take care of her younger brothers and sisters and pay off her debts, she became a courtesan. But fortunately, she joined Sukyin Chilua and was able to save enough money to pay off all her debts. But at the last meeting, in order to settle the situation, Jin Zhong-hee brought up something unexpected. That day, Jun-hai said that she might not know, but her father had borrowed even more money from him than he did now. And this man presented a promissory note stamped with the seal of the Gok family martial arts school. The amount was enormous, far more than she could ever hope to repay. Mu thought about it and said that perhaps he offered some conditions in exchange for destroying the bill. Georgina was surprised and asked how he knew about it. Mu replied that the tricks of dubious moneylenders were easy to recognize. And what conditions did he set? It was a forced marriage, wasn't it? Georgina replied that yes, that was right. But he hadn't proposed himself. He wanted her to marry someone else. Mu asked for whom. Mengshin answered, a little unusually, but his name is Yang Jae-hyun. Mu said that the name was familiar to him, and asked if he was related to the Gardvi. How exactly? Georgina replied that Yang Jae-hyun was the teacher of security guard V. Mu realized that things had just gotten more complicated. Mu said that since Jae-hyun is Guardian V's teacher, he can't interfere. That's why the request came to him, right? Georgina replied that no, that was not the only reason. Mu was surprised and asked to tell him the details of the request, but to let them remember it. He has actually retired from the mercenary business. If the job involves destroying an IOU or killing Junhai or Jae-hyun, he will refuse. He doesn't do that kind of work anymore. Minshin got angry and asked, "Have you killed a teacher?" Let Mr. Mu watch his tongue for a while. Georgina saw this and asked him to calm down. Mu said that he would consider this an improper request. Georgina replied that Guardian V had tried to help, even knowing his master was involved, but she had strongly advised him not to. Guard V's entire family works as servants for Jae-hyun at the Baireg martial arts school. If Guard V interferes, his family could be in danger. V was angry and said it was all his fault. Georgina said she couldn't let V's bodyguard take such a risk for her troubles. Mu noticed something and was even surprised, and he thought, what exactly does Hyang want from him? He should play the role of matchmaker between these two. Georgina said she disliked what Junhai had said the most. Until his last day, her father had never mentioned the extra debt, not even on his deathbed, and he was not one to hide such things. Mu said the bill was counterfeit. Georgina said it was, and asked Jin's guardian to prove it was counterfeit. After all, he is the legendary guardian of Jin, who exposed the injustice against a worthy subject in one day, and his martial arts are unrivaled, and she is confident that he can handle this task. Mu realized that the scheme of counterfeiting the seal of a martial arts family and the involvement of a famous school. This is really a difficult case, and someone with his skills is needed to check it. And now, of course, he understands why Nan Hyang recommended him. He is the only one who can do this job. Mu told them that they knew he wasn't stingy, right? Georgina asked him in return if he accepted the request. Mu replied that yes, 50 yen as a down payment. If he failed, he would not ask for more, but if he succeeded, he wanted compensation other than money. Would she agree to the terms? Georgina immediately responded that she agreed. Taking the money in his hands, Mu said that they had reached an agreement, and now he could leave everything to him. And now he had some questions for Lady Gok. Georgina said she had some, and she would answer what she could. Mu asked how similar the seal on the bill was to her family's original seal. Georgina replied that they were so identical that they could not be distinguished with the naked eye, and their seal has intricate patterns that follow certain rules. And it is not easy to forge. Even a perfect forgery will not deceive it. Mu thought about it, and said that even if the fake was so good that Lady Da couldn't recognize it, it must be the work of experts. And does she know anyone in Luoyang who could create something so flawless? Minshin replied that he had asked around, and there was no one with that level of skill in Luoyang right now. Mu said that since there is no one now, then there was someone in the past. Minshin answered that yes, that is absolutely true. Mu asked who it was. Minshin replied that his name was Yu Dok-sam, but they had no reason to suspect him. Mu asked why not. The boy replied that he had died more than 5 years ago, long before the bill was drawn up. Mu listened to their conditions and immediately came to the lady. Hyang met him and asked why he was so irritated. Let him calm down a little. But Mu still couldn't calm down and asked, "Isn't this like protecting his beloved under the guise of a request? Is he some kind of bridge that will reunite the separated lovers, like the shepherd and the weaver?" But Hyang asked him in return, "Isn't it cute? At least it's a request to kill someone. Or does he prefer to receive such tasks?" Mu replied that of course he wouldn't mind earning some money. But Hyang told him that if he successfully completed the task, Unsol would introduce him to someone. The guy, hearing these words, immediately took note. The girl said that this was a person who was well versed in the internal affairs of the Sama family. Mu replied that since he had taken on this job, he would do it properly. But Hyang said that of course, Unsol and V's relationship should never end. Mu asked her why she didn't just tie them together with a red thread, but he already figured out, and he's not taking requests to kill people anymore, and he's not going to solve problems that way. He asked her if she had ever investigated the case of Yu Dok-sam. Hyang replied that he was not only a top-notch expert in Luoyang, but also one of the most famous counterfeiters in Hunan province. He died of illness 5 years ago, and she also heard that he had a wife and daughter, but 7 years ago someone killed them. Mu was surprised and asked if his family was killed or what. Hyang replied that he had many clients, but also many enemies. Such things are common for people from the criminal world. Mu said it was true, but could he create a perfect seal? Hyang replied that, judging by his reputation, he had the ability to do so. But the guy thought about it and said that there were 2 options. Either he would make a fake seal and give it to Jin Jun before he died, or there's an heir who has been secretly learning the Dok Sam counterfeiting technique. Hyang asked him which he thought was more likely. Mu replied that they would only know after further investigation, and let her tell him everything she knew about Jae Hyun, Master V. Hyang said he was 47 years old. His nickname was Flying Dragon Spear, and he was the owner of a flying dragon fighting hall. It has a history of more than 50 years and considerable authority in the orthodox military world of Luoyang. And about a year and a half ago, he tried hard to win Yunsol's favor, but he was constantly rejected. Because of his pride, he acted cautiously, so rumors did not spread. Mu said that the old man who had lived for many years was behaving so ridiculously. But suddenly he remembered and asked, when did Wei Mingxin become a bodyguard? Hyang replied that a year ago. She of course knew that he was Jae Hyun's student, because the latter personally asked to accept him. And he shouldn't even be asking. Does he know how many rats gather around the liquor business? And to do business here without problems, be it Orthodox sects or the Sama clan, you need to maintain close relations with sects of a certain size. Mu asked, so she needed the support of the Flying Dragon Fighting Hall? The girl answered that it was exactly like that. And besides, Wei Mingxin is a naive child with no experience in the world of martial arts. If used correctly, they will be able to learn more about the Flying Dragon Battle Hall and Jae Hyun's movements. But even she didn't expect Eun-sol and Wei Mi-jin to fall in love. Mu said that people's hearts are unpredictable. But does Yang, Jae Hyun know about their relationship? Hyang replied that no. No one knows except her. So how could he know? Mu replied that he understood everything in general. Now that he was investigating, was there anything he should be careful about? Hyang was surprised and said that it was the first time she heard him say such words. The guy said that it was because he was no longer alone. People change, don't they? The girl told him not to forget that the Flying Dragon Battle Hall was a branch of a sect that was related by blood to the Sama family. Still, it is the least visible sect of the 9, and if he touches them carelessly, it may lead to trouble with the main family, so let him be careful. Mu replied that he understood and would keep that in mind. Suddenly, Hyang remembered and said that he didn't know the geography of the area very well. And doesn't he need a guide? Mu replied that he had already found one, so there was nothing to worry about. The girl became curious and asked who it was, but the guy didn't answer and went straight to the city. She reminded that merely proving that the bill was counterfeit would not lead to a decision. The ideal scenario is Yoon Jun-hai burning the IOU with his own hands and Jae Hyun giving up on Eun-sol. But he knows it won't be easy. When Mu entered the restaurant, he asked the waiter to bring him a teapot of oolong tea. The girl replied that it would be right away. Guy decided that for now, he should focus on proving the bill was counterfeit. Suddenly, an unknown guest entered the restaurant, and Mu said that it was a coincidence that he was alone, so there was an empty seat next to him. And if she had nowhere else to go, why not have tea with him? The girl asked him in surprise if he had noticed. After all, she really did put a lot of effort into disguising herself. Mu replied that if Solan said so, then maybe she could at least put on a mask. Lan said that he spoke as if he knew she would come. Mu replied that it was because he knew Solan's heart was unwaveringly devoted to him. Lan said she found it funny and asked if he was being too confident. Mu asked in return, then why did the department head come to see him in the middle of her busy schedule? And why was she looking at him so intently? Lan replied that maybe they should go straight to the hotel. Mu replied that it sounded good, but he had something to do first. Lan said that was what she thought when he left the Suyeon pavilion. The guy replied that this time he was taking on the case to solve it, and he needed information about his whereabouts. And while she was telling him she could take him around Luoyang, Lan replied that it wasn't even funny, and she was an incredibly busy woman. But the guy said that if she didn't help him, he would suffer huge losses. Lan asked in surprise what losses. Mu replied that the reason she stayed in Luoyang for so long was that she was looking for Song, OK Pavilion. And if she helped him, she might get a clue about it. Lan realized that she was in a desperate situation and decided to speak out. But Lan asked how she could trust someone who lied as easily as he ate. Mu replied that it was up to So Ran to decide. Having said these words, he suddenly lifted the glass of tea and, in anger, mentally broke the bottom of the mug. Lan was surprised and said that he had become even rougher since she had last seen him, and that it might be quicker to get him to spill everything he knew. And let Mu tell her why she should leave his limbs intact. And while she waits for his answer, she will think about how to play with him. Mu said no, and she would never do that. Lan was surprised and asked him why. The boy replied that it was because Lan's feelings for him were unwavering. The girl realized that he was right and frowned. But Lan couldn't stand it and started shouting that it was a masterpiece. Mu asked her, and what happened? The girl replied that he was the only man who could make her laugh. She had already forgotten his shameless charm. Then she joined the conversation and asked how she could help him. Mu replied that it was a long story, so don't let her fall asleep in the middle of it. When she started to speak, Lan listened and said that she knew Doc Sam well. He was quite famous among the criminal underworld of Luoyang. And this level of skill in document forgery is something everyone dreams of. 7 years ago, before his wife and children were killed, he was very active. But after a family tragedy, he abandoned his work completely and drowned in alcohol. Eventually, he died of alcoholism. Even though Gok Mandan had borrowed the money 4 years ago, Doc Sam couldn't do anything about it. Mu asked her why. The girl replied that 5 years ago Doc Sam had severe tremors due to alcohol withdrawal. He was incapable of counterfeiting stamps, let alone selling ordinary stamps. Mu asked, then, aren't there other skilled counterfeiters in Luoyang? The girl replied that not only in Luoyang, but in the entire province, she could say with certainty that there were none. Mu thought and said that then there was only one possibility. Doc himself left a successor who was as skilled as he was. Lan told him that if he wanted to find a successor, there was a way. And if he told her about the clue in C&OK, she would tell him everything. Mu asked if they were playing dirty. The girl replied that it was simply an exchange of necessary information. Isn't that a fair exchange? Mu replied that he thought she was right. And then the darkest place under the lamp. The answer was not far away. Lan was surprised and asked him why he suddenly became like this. The guy replied that this was a hint he was giving her. Let her think carefully. But if Lan gives, then he should receive in return. Lan replied, that's right. There's a tomb robber named No Chul. He was a friend who took care of Dok Sam before he died. If there is a successor, he probably knows, so we need to find him. Mu asked where he could find him. Lan replied that if he helped her again, she would lead him to where he could find Chul. And she feels uncomfortable wearing these men's clothes. They're a little suffocating. If only he could help her change. Mu replied that if she had everything, of course he couldn't refuse her. After all this, he arrived at the place and said that this was the Luoyang branch of the beggar sect. But suddenly, seeing that Luo Yin was still hugging him, he asked if it was time for her to leave. Then asked why. After all, he likes it too. Mu replied that he was working, so she shouldn't distract him. Finding the very place, Mu asked, is that the man there? Lan replied that she said so, and he will come out now. And this shaggy guy Bugong, the 8th rank of the beggar sect. Does this guy know the whereabouts of the tomb robber No Chul? Mu asked. Lan said yes. Dok Sam. But Chul and Bugong grew up in the same neighborhood and were close friends. They know each other better than anyone else. Mu said that if they catch this Bugong, they will know about No Chul and Dok Sam. But the 8th rank of the beggar sect, there might be problems with that. Lan asked him why. Was he afraid of dealing with the beggar sect? The boy replied that it was not because he was easy to catch, but because he was not so easy to make talk. Lan smiled and said that torturing him to tell everything was her specialty. Should she help? The girl asked. Mu replied that no. and since it was his friends, he didn't think torture would work. Suddenly the boy thought and said that he had a good idea. At that time, one of the beggars was walking and enjoying his life. But a moment later, he saw a very strange guy next to him, and after that he went out into the forest and began to move at high speed. The man opened the bush in front of him and said, "I finally found this cute little thing, and how delicious it looks. And if it weren't for the squad leader's urgent call, she would already be in his stomach." But he was not left alone by the noise that came from the murder of several murderers from the bloody hall. Suddenly a stranger appeared and snatched the piece of meat from his hands. It was Mu, who told the man that he was disgusted by the piece of meat he was eating. The man was shocked and asked who he was. Mu replied that he wanted to ask him something, and he put a piece of meat in his hands. But the man was rude and told the boy to get out of there, and he started running away from him. Mu said, as befits an 8th-rank beggar sect, his escape tactics are impressive, but he still won't get far. The man had already entered the forest and thought, who is this guy, and what is he even trying to do? But he saw with his own eyes how the leaves began to slowly fall from the trees, and he couldn't believe it. Mu used his powers to trap him, and the trap was Lan and her powers. The doe immediately pulled out the rope and, throwing it around the man's neck, immediately tied him up and held him. The man began to resist, and the girl began to say that this damn pig had nothing but strength. Lanya started to panic, said that she was tired of this, and told the guy to finish him off already. Mu replied that he was approaching and immediately ran to attack, but the man noticed this and struck. Mu dodged his blow and appeared behind him. Without thinking twice, he struck with all his strength and knocked him out. Lan told the boy that, as he said, it would be easy to catch them. The boy replied that these people were from the sect of beggars who were always distracted by food. The girl asked him what he was going to do next. Mu replied that he would take him to a very scary place, and he wants him to be afraid of it and always run away as soon as he sees it. The girl said she was an expert in this if it came to that, and this is the place she told him about. They tied the man up and sat him in a chair, so he could be comfortable too. Mu saw him open his eyes, kicked the chair, and started screaming for him to wake up. The man was very scared and asked who they were, and why were they doing this to him. Mu replied that they were asking questions. It was in his interests to cooperate, and if he doesn't want to, then he'll only have his hands left, and he can't hear him answer anymore. The man got scared and started screaming. The guy looked at it and thought about it, and said he should start with a couple of fractures. The man saw a log in front of him and asked someone to help him. After all this, Mu began to torture and beat him, and at night, having received information, he released him and sent him to his area. The guy was completely beaten. There wasn't even a single piece left of him, but he screamed that they were crazy. But Mu did not leave him alone, but rushed after him, found himself right at the entrance to the village, and immediately punched him in the elbow. The man was still screaming that they had simply grabbed and kidnapped him in broad daylight, and then beaten him like a mongrel. And so, not giving him any peace, they took turns beating him. The man thought that if he had not untied the rope on his hands, today would have been his funeral. They let him go, and looking down from the rooftops, they could only hear the man screaming that he had been beaten. Lan asked the boy if he had heard what the beggar had said. Mu replied that if heaven existed, he would have been punished long ago. The girl asked him to tell her how he knew that if he was released, he would go to no coal instead of telling his superiors. Mu replied that there was something to thank Lan for. The girl was surprised and asked her. Mu replied that the beggar sect does not know No Chul's whereabouts. No Gon, his close friend, knows this very well and hides it from the sect. The girl asked him how he knew this. Mu replied that she looked very similar to Daewok Sama's friend, but he himself did not know where No Chul was. And if the beggar sect knew the location of coal, then everyone would know him, right? Lan thought for a moment and replied that yes. And if he didn't know something, then it meant she couldn't get information from the 9 mystics of the lower world from the Void branch. And the sect's information is being carefully studied by the 9 mystics of the lower world. And for that matter, the sect doesn't actually know where coal is. Mu immediately remembered how he had beaten up a beggar some time ago and said that he had robbed the grave of his ancestor, No Chul, 10 years ago. And where was he now? And if after such an incident someone attacks, no chul, Gun will immediately go and tell him, and not run to complain to the sect. Lon asked the guy if they wanted to see where the guy went. Mu replied that he was in the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall. Mu thought for a moment and said that was interesting. Lon turned and told the boy that she thought he could do it without her. Mu asked if she was leaving him already. Lon replied that she didn't have time to waste all day. Besides, she had a report to prepare. Mu didn't linger and thanked her for her help. Lon was surprised and asked him, "Just thank you?" After all, their work wasn't finished yet. The guy decided to take action and suggested having dinner together after he finished his business. The girl asked him if he was calling her to the Sukyum Pavilion. She would have to look for him there. Mu replied that no, and that it was not a very good idea. He would not go there again. The girl was surprised and accepted everything as it was. Lon said goodbye to him and walked away into the darkness. Mu looked at the sect and said that he now had to finish his business. Mu used his incredible abilities to infiltrate the sect and utilize the stealth of the death god. The guy started stalking and realized that the beggars smelled pretty bad, but that would make it easier for him to track down his target. Stopping above the house, he saw Gon in the mirror and the man who was next to him coming out of it. It was that same man. The beggar told the boy that this time he had not come for food. The boy was surprised and asked why then. The beggar replied that he had risked his life to warn him that some very scary people were chasing him, and let him see what they had done to him, and a worse fate awaited him. The guy turned out to be no Cole. He asked in surprise, "Is someone hunting him?" The beggar replied that yes, and they are incredible martial artists. And he asked Cole if he remembered the grave the boy robbed 10 years ago, and now one of his relatives decided to take revenge on him. He heard it clearly. Cole asked, how can he remember something from the distant past? The beggar replied that, judging by that guy, that grave was clearly not that of a simple man. He had crossed the wrong family. Cole asked the man where was the guarantee that he wasn't cheating him. He always came to his house to steal money and food. The beggar told him to look at him. He came here risking his life, and now what does he get in return? And did Cole understand that he was barely alive and came to him instead of running away? Mu was standing at the window at that moment, wondering how much longer he would have to listen to their stupid dialogue, and he thought that maybe he should grab them both and beat them up. Suddenly, Cole interrupted the conversation and asked how Daewuk Sama's baby was doing. And now Mu has received information that Duk Sama's child is here, and this is an unexpected turn for him. Cole told the beggar that he was tired of telling him that it was no big deal. The beggar replied that he was still worried about the girl being alone among strangers. The guy told him that he fusses over everything. So here he is. Biren is a martial arts school from the side branch of the Heavenly Horse clan, famous throughout Murai. And the beggar thinks that the head will allow something to happen to his disciple, especially since he doesn't know that Hong A is Dway-sama's daughter, and he takes good care of her, so there is no reason to worry. The beggar replied that everything is fine, and he trusts only him, and they have to take care of Hong until he takes revenge on the man who killed his fiancée and crippled Duk Samu. Chul said that as promised, Jung Hai caught the culprit, but still hasn't found any evidence pointing to him. The beggar couldn't take it anymore and hit the guy, said he was crazy, and told him not to say anything. He never said that name. And in any case, let him be careful. The kidnappers are looking for him. Cole replied that they both should be careful. Suddenly the beggar said that he really wanted something. And did he have anything to chew on? Cole replied that he knew the beggar would talk about food, and let him wait a little, because they would bring him what was left in the kitchen. Mu also decided to go, as he had received a lot of interesting information. As expected, good bait is needed to get the fish to bite. But he turned into a spirit again and entered the house. At that moment, Cole knocked on the door and asked if Hong A was sleeping. Hong A was surprised and asked the gentleman what was being built at such and such an hour. Mu saw her face and realized that it was that same Hong A. And she looks like 17, 18 years old. And she looks like a beautiful woman. And he understands Pu Gong's worries. Cole told her to ignore it, and he just hoped that she wouldn't have any discomfort here. Hong A replied that it was okay, no need to worry. Mu stepped aside because he had already learned everything he needed to know, and it was time to move on to the next step. At this time, while Wa was lying at home and resting to gain strength, the mercenary used his powers to break into the room. The mercenary said that it would be easy to kidnap such a child. He decided to give her an elixir so that she could sleep longer. But suddenly Hyang entered the room and saw that someone had broken into the room. The mercenary turned around and realized that he had been exposed. The owner realized that a black rat had been caught behind her. She said that it was a small rat. I think their guards need to be taught a lesson. They've gotten too cocky. The mercenary decided to get rid of her and attacked her, saying it was nothing personal. The landlady decided that there were no witnesses. She would deal with him herself. She asked him at the moment of the attack, what was he trying to do? The lady saw his sword and, grabbing the fan, easily waved her hand and repelled his attack. Hyang said that for her, on the contrary, it was very personal. And then she carried out several attacks at once, which even the mercenary could not cope with, and flew to the side. The mercenary realized that she was skilled in martial arts, but suddenly someone behind him grabbed his head and covered his mouth with a hand. But without thinking twice, it turned out to be the mistress. She used her speed and broke his neck. Suddenly, Wa opened her eyes after sleeping because some noise woke her up a little. But then she saw the body of a dead mercenary underneath her. Wa couldn't help but scream at the entire sect in fear. The other mercenaries were outside and said that something had gone wrong, and the black rat had failed the mission. They decided not to take any more risks and immediately disappeared from sight before they were discovered. But instead of leaving, they turned around halfway and burst into the room, smashing the front door. The mercenary told the ally to be careful. After all, this woman killed the black rat. Her fighting ability is extraordinary. At this moment, Mu appeared behind them and said that Hyang didn't usually look so scary. The mercenary turned around and asked him who he was. Mu immediately pulled out his fire blade and told the woman to close Soso's eyes. Hyang heard this, opened her fan, and placed it right in front of the girl's eyes so that she would not see such a sight. Mu decided not to spare them and, using his speed and fire sword, cut them into small pieces. The mercenaries didn't even have time to make a few movements before Mu had already put the sword back into the holster. Hyang told him that skills cannot be wasted. Mu replied that the same was true for her. Soso turned to his uncle and was glad he had come. But Mu said they had to save the boy and they would have to dig into his past. But he can't let anything go wrong, and he doesn't want anything to happen to Soso. Hyang smiled and told him that he was a pretty good team player. And he knows he owes her, doesn't he? Her services cost money. Mu asked her to take care of a widower with a child. But the mistress replied that then she would simply listen to the big flowers case, and that would be the end of it. And by the way, he's just going to leave the bodies in the little girl's room. Let her clean up a bit. Mu replied that she should leave it to Jean. At this time, the contractor was informed that the task had failed, and the black rat had not lived up to expectations. But the black rat had nothing that belonged to her, and even the child's abilities were not enough to find her. He was angry because he would have stayed in Shanghai, so why do you have to come all this way and bother him? And suddenly, the tenant thought and suggested using people who had a grudge against him. Then he would see if he could get a Sowa. Mu suddenly pulled out a knife, looked at the girl, and said that perhaps they would test Soso's abilities. The next morning, Mrs. Hyang decided to tidy up Soso a little and began to comb her hair. Suddenly Mu came in and asked the girl if she had slept. Soso told her uncle that of course she had, but she had only had terrible dreams. Mu said it clearly. And of course, it's not easy to sleep peacefully after she's been through something like that. Soso let go of her head and thanked her uncle for saving her again. Mu replied that she should thank Madame Hyang instead. Hyang got angry at his words and asked who he called mistress, but Mu didn't pay any attention to her and told the girl that in any case, if she needed to do something, here was her tool to do it. And it was on the man who tried to kidnap her last night. And now she could use her ability to read the memory of the one who held her. Soso took it and said that she would try it now. Suddenly something indescribable began to happen. Everything around her began to glow, and Soso concentrated so much on the knife that her eyes swelled. Soso began to see all of her memories, and how all three mercenaries were standing in front of her room and watching. Suddenly, Soso's energy evaporated, and Mu saw her lose consciousness and fall onto the bed. Hyang asked if this baby would be okay. Mu replied that she was okay. She was just tired, and that was all. Seeing that Soso had opened her eyes, he asked her what she had seen. Let her tell. The girl answered that it was a secret sect, and immediately closed her eyes again and fell asleep. Mu wasn't even surprised by her words, and said that he had suspected it. And as expected, that was exactly what was affecting her body. The mistress told him that if he knew this, then shouldn't he have checked her this way? Mu replied that he still needed to confirm it, and they needed to find out who these people were in order to plan their next steps. Madam asked him in surprise if he was going to storm the Chaos Sect. Mu replied that no, he would not do that. As long as Soso is here, they're not going anywhere, and they'll come for her again. And when they do, they'll pay the price. The hostess was surprised and said that he sounded so confident. But eventually, when he left, she would have to face them again, like this time. Mu looked at her and said, "The pavilion leader can't leave a small and poor girl. Can he?" The lady replied that she was going to start demanding his salary. The guy told her not to worry because he would work hard for her, so maybe she could spare him? Hyang said sure, and that's the reason she hired him in the first place. Mu said that he would then complete his mission, and throwing the medicine into her hands, told her to give it to the child when she woke up. Hyang was shocked and asked, "Is this medicine?" Mu replied that it is very expensive, and most of the deposit for this mission went to buy it. Hyang was surprised and said that instead of talking about expensive medicines, she thought that being a little kinder to her would be more effective. And it is not easy for a person to change immediately. After that, Mu went up to the top floor and saw Manshin working. He asked the guy if he was there. Manshin opened his eyes and answered that he was here, and asked the guy what brought him here. Mu answered that he came to ask him about something. Manshin asked him if he had made any progress in his investigation. Mu replied something like that, but not yet specifically enough to report on it. Mu asked him if there was a girl named Hong among his teacher's new students. The boy was surprised and asked how he knew. She had only recently joined, so rumors had not yet spread. Mu replied that he had his own abilities, and he wanted to know about her. Her name, age, origin, and character. Mengshin replied that her name was Hong A, and she was 17 years old. And 7 years ago, her father, No Guan, had enrolled her in a martial arts school that had wandered further into Jianghu. Hong A has a heart as beautiful as her looks, earning her great love from both her master and her inspiration. And 3 months ago, she even became an honorary student of the master. And 3 months ago, he himself became an anonymous student of the master. And as far as he knows, there are no other special stories. Mu thanked him for the information, but Mengshin asked him why he was so fascinated by Hong A. Mu replied that there were things in this world that were dangerous to know. Mengshin understood and did not ask further, but he thought that with his emotions, obvious expression, and such a weak spirit, it would be better for him to stay away from Jianghu for his own good. After this, Mu came to Su and said that he needed his help. Su became angry and asked him if he had gone crazy. Mu replied that the work was easy and the pay was good. His shop looked like he was barely making ends meet. Su told the boy that if he came here just to rub salt into his wounds, then he should leave immediately. Mu took out a bag and said that there were 10 silver coins in there. He just needed to do a very simple task, and he would give them to him right away. Su grabbed the bag and replied that he would take the money first. But Mu told him that he was greedy, but superficial on the outside. Su asked what simple task he was talking about. Mu told him to just give some information to the people he pointed out. After this meeting, Mu went to Jin's house, a place where people came with joy and left with tears. And naturally, since it was an illegal gambling tent, Mu walked in and immediately found himself in another world where people bet all their money. Suddenly a girl came up to him and said that he must be new here, and what brought a distinguished guest to their house, she asked. Mu replied that he had come to bet 10 silver coins on the dice. The girl told him that he looked like a very experienced guest and was suitable for the middle table. Let him follow her. As he passed the other players, he heard someone tell Commissioner Gong that it looked like he was being beaten again. But the commissioner replied that today's happiness should belong to the hero Yang. Mu looked at them and saw that the hero sitting and gambling in the gambling house for the poor was very funny. Suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, the girl slipped and said that this table looked great. As Mu approached the table, he immediately saw that Yang Ilchen's eldest son, Yang Han-san, was sitting at the table. Now is the time to cast a line, he thought, and he asked the players if he could join the game too. The player looked at Mu and said that this should be interesting, and new participants are always welcome and can sit in an empty chair. Mu looked at him and thanked him for being so kind. The player told him that he had to start with money, so how much would the new player bet? Mu replied that it was his first time playing this game, so he would start with this amount. He immediately put his money on the table. The player saw such money and said that he was a man of great ambitions, and he even liked it. And since he's new, he'll give him a chance to take the lead. But will he be able to say his name? Mu replied that he should call him Jin Day High-Up. He realized that in a life full of ruins and games, Day High-Up would die of cold. The reason they were here was part of his plan. And earlier, he spread rumors using Sue to reach him. And he told them that there would be a big sin game at Jean Gaijin's house tonight. He was also able to gather a lot of information from Lon. The connection between Jean Gaijin's house and the flying dragon spear, and the fact that he, Yin Han-san, was dependent on the games. But even someone like him, he's just a fishing rod to smell the big fish. And now all that's left is to fight the rod. And that's how the big fish will be caught. After just a few games, the players were very unhappy with his play, as every move he made was aimed at winning. One of the players just suddenly stood up and said that she had quit the game. But Mu didn't stop and continued to earn money. After a few games, the other player stood up and said that he had enough. He had already lost. But suddenly two guys came up, and one of them said that the game was getting more and more interesting. The second guy, who had not yet sat at the table, suggested that they also raise the stakes. But Jan met them and said that the game had become so big, but now there were two magnificent figures on the table. The new players immediately sat down next to Yang. Mu smiled and thanked them for their participation as the atmosphere grew tense. Mu saw that great figures, great masters, players were having a good time. He immediately suggested that they take advantage of this intensity and finish it with one game. Mu asked, what do they think about this? And slowly moved all his hard-earned money to the center of the table. Mu saw their faces and asked if they were hesitant to make their move. In that case, he would give them the initiative. Jan couldn't resist and agreed, saying that he was bored enough already. And he also suggested making this game big. Other players also saw Young move forward, followed him, and bet all their money. Jan was the first to play with the stones, and, having released them onto the table, pulled out 2 stones with 11 points. After this, the Balashiki started shouting for them to make this game truly great and to congratulate Jan Han-san. Mu looked at him and saw that this guy was really becoming a laughingstock, and the other players had pulled out much less and had already lost their money. Mu took the stones in his hands and said that now he was the last one to throw them, and now everything would be decided. Everyone waited for the right moment while Mu spun the bowl of stones and had to pull out the result. Mu looked at their faces and said he would check it out. Taking the bowl, Yang was shocked and couldn't believe his eyes. And when he saw 12 dots on the stones, he realized that he had lost all his money. People were surprised and asked if it made sense. And it's a miracle, of course. They've never seen 12 points come up. Mu said he was probably just luckier. But Yin didn't agree and started shouting that it was a hoax. But Mu asked him what he was talking about. After all, there is no such thing as a hoax with dice. Yang turned to So-Jo and said that he thought it was time to close the store for the day. So-Jo understood what Joe was talking about, and in the evening after the game, he went with the bandits to Sue's store. They kicked everyone out at once and said that business in Jean Gaijin's house was finished for today. Let everyone leave here immediately. Jan lost his temper, walked up to the guy, and said that he had picked the wrong person to joke about. And did he know who was standing in front of him? And in front of him stands Yin Han-san, famous in the world of martial arts for his iron spear. Mu asked, iron-piercing spear? But that's quite an impressive nickname. And judging from the fact that they use a spear with the surname Yang, he must be a descendant of the flying dragon. Even if it is an illegal gambling tent, trying to turn the game around by force is too low, isn't it? Ian started screaming that he was going to kill himself with his hand, but now this guy is speeding up his death, and he would have to tear out his tongue for all the lies he had told. But Mu replied that he was sorry for neither his hand nor his tongue. Mu did not play with them for long or much, and then suddenly hit both warriors with his fist and broke both of their arms. Mu Yin told him that he would not hand him over to an ignorant vagabond like him. The warriors immediately began to fight, but Yin raised his hand and ordered them to stop. Mu asked the iron-piercing spear, "What will he do now?" Yin realized that this guy is not just a player without a goal. But suddenly the most important one came in and asked what all the fuss was about. Mu was surprised at that moment and looked at him. The head said that it seemed like an interesting game was developing, didn't it? And then Mu rejoiced because a big fish had been caught. In fact, Mu was waiting for Jin Junhai. After all, this was all intended just for him. And he didn't come here to cheat Yin and rob him of his money. He came here to attack him, Master Dom Jin. Junhai said, "Can they tell me what's going on here?" Yang replied that the guy was cheating at the gaming booth. But Mu said he didn't know what Yang was talking about. It was just joyful. But he suggested that they calm down first. And there's no point in arguing about something that's already happened. Wouldn't it be better to settle it fairly? And he will join in too. That would guarantee fair play without cheating, wouldn't it? Yin realized that this was the case, and if Master House Jin joined, there would be no room for cheating. And what's more, it would be an exceptionally big game. Yang softened and said that it was very good, and he agreed. But Mu replied that, judging from the atmosphere, he must be someone very important here. After all, a real gambler wouldn't mind upping the ante, would he? He's using this game to prove his innocence. He sat down at the table and apologized to them. But Mu suggested that they settle it with this game, and he would have bet 1250 silver taels. And asked altogether again, is he really so sure? Yang approached the great hero Jin with a request that he did not have enough money. And could he lend him a century-old promise? He replied that there was no problem with that. But Mu also said he was not against century-old promises, but they had to come from a reliable source. And century-old promises had to come from one of the three major financial institutions. He said it was convenient. Jin Manor only accepts century pledges from the main branch of Taiwan Financial Hall, one of the three main institutions. And century pledges will be used there too. Mu took the stones in his hands and said that there were 3,750 taels in total. This was a suitable amount for the final game, and he asked who would go first. After a good game, a girl came and told Mu that he had received 3,700 taels in 100-year deposits and 50 taels in silver. Mu took his winnings and said that this game was very satisfying. But Yang asked the great hero Jin if he was sure it was okay to let him go like this. He replied that he knew some martial arts. If Yang treated him carelessly, it would only lead to unnecessary trouble. And anyway, the only money this guy would take away was 50 silver taels. However, if he were to take the 100-year promise to the Taiwan Financial Hall, it would be problematic. Yang replied that he was aware of it. If he went to Taiwan Finance Hall, he would personally handle it. And whoever dared to insult him could not live. In the morning, Mu came to Xiang and said that this was a century-old promise from the Taiwan Financial Hall, issued by the Jin Manor. Yang asked in surprise, a century-old promise? And 3,700 silver taels? But that's a very large sum of money. Mu asked, so what? It's all fake anyway. Yang asked in surprise, fake? Mu replied that he confirmed it from Su on the way here. But Madam said that it made no sense. The seal was identical to the seal of the Taiwan Financial Hall. She could not recognize the false promise of centuries. Mu asked her if this level of exact forgery reminded her of someone. Madam asked if it was really Sol. Mu replied that this was exactly what was needed. With such advanced forging skills, even Seol couldn't tell that his father's seal was fake. Madam said that the person who forged the Gok Marshall family's seal also created this age-old promise. Mu replied that this was correct. This was a complication of most affairs, and it was time to wrap things up. Mu asked her why she was making such a face. The hostess replied that it was just that all this was really necessary. She wondered if he was asking for something unrealistic. Mu answered the mistress. What is she even saying such soft things? Is she afraid for him? The mistress said no, and that is not true at all. But he sighed. Let him follow in Yazin's footsteps anyway. Mu replied that everything had already been done, and now all that was left was to complete it. The lady asked him if he was going to the Taihua Financial Hall. Mu replied that no, going there would be boring. So he heads to the Flying Dragon Battle Manor instead. It would be the best plan after all. At this time, Su received the letter and said that it would not be difficult to deliver it. But why did he need this man? Was it really for this? Mu replied that it was all part of a big plan. He was counting on him alone, and when he thought about it, he thought, Su wants to know, so he will tell him. Su said that regarding Ms. Wu from Song OK Pavilion, who was involved in the murder case he solved, her whereabouts recently seemed to be unclear. Mu replied that he understood and was grateful for the information. But Su thought that this guy either already knew that Chan Young was missing, or at least expected it. But anyway, it was none of his business, and he decided to hurry up and finish his work here. Suddenly, a girl came up to him and asked, what did someone say, that they had business with her? Su replied that someone had asked him to deliver it to her, and then he placed the sealed letter in her hands. In the end, Su said that he did as he was told and did not know what kind of trouble she was starting. But if she causes any trouble, this Enrang won't let her go so easily. And he told Muang to watch out for her not to overdo it. The next day, Mu walked around and said, yes, he didn't lie. He just didn't say anything, so he didn't deceive Nan Hyang. But if she found out, that pipe would hit him on the head. But would it be enough to ask for forgiveness? But suddenly, Yang, in chief, he came up behind him and said that he was wondering whether to go to Su Xiang Pavilion. But he came here himself, so he was grateful to him for it. Mu was surprised because that was exactly what he was going to say. And so far he has followed the plan so well that I can't thank him enough. After all this, one of the guys came to his clan. The man met his son-in-law and said that he never thought that he would visit them so unexpectedly. The brother-in-law said that he came to Luoyang to investigate the Song Okru incident. He simply came to visit his son-in-law's military office. The man replied that he understood in the Flying Dragon Battle Mansion. He was not fully prepared because it happened so suddenly. And if she had sent the message in advance, he would have given him a copy and asked Shurin if he was looking for something. The son-in-law replied that no, he was a rude, tactless lowlife who didn't care about the rules of behavior. Did he forget something here? Mu stood in front of them and said that it seemed like they were both thinking the same thing as him at the same time. Yang asked what he was even saying. Mu asked him back if he was planning on making another big scene. Maybe they would let him join in. Jan couldn't help but laugh loudly, and he said it with such skill, and he didn't care about the jokes of the world. But Yin told Jean there was no time for idle talk. If he wanted to leave alive, make him hand over the token from the Taiwan money house. But Mu turned around and, feeling that the warriors were attacking him, asked, had they ever seen such a shameful man? Yin shouted, what a disgrace of her. The worst things happen all the time in the martial arts world. The problem was his naive nature, and immediately ordered them to attack. The warriors all rushed at him at once, weapons in hand, but Mu was not afraid of anything and simply began to fight them, exhausting himself. But the warriors were shocked and did not even expect that he would turn out to be such a good master. Mu was so good that they couldn't even predict where the attack would come from. And finally, Mu gave Yin a double kick right in the head to make him answer for his words. Mu jumped over him and said that he may be naive, but he is confident in his abilities. After this, Yang was shocked and ordered his warriors to immediately catch him and finish him off. Mu saw that they were still pursuing him, and after a moment, he jumped into the air to strike. Yang shouted that this crazy guy was heading to the martial arts hall with a flying dragon. Let them catch him before his father noticed. Mu was still running and wondering where he could be. He must have received his letter, and he would be here to break his neck. Entering the clan, he saw a very familiar person and immediately stopped for a few moments. Mu didn't waste any time and shouted to the guy that he was here. And then he introduced himself and gave his name. The guy was a little surprised and shocked. Mu tried to walk forward, and suddenly the guard immediately stopped him. The guards asked, "Who is this guy? Can't he just stand there?" But Shuren couldn't take it anymore and ordered them to stop. Mu said that his inertia remained the same, but did he actually become even stronger? Standing opposite each other, Mu told the boy that he was afraid that he would not show up after so-and-so called him. The guy replied that it was a shameless attitude and he really hadn't changed. The man also asked Shuren if he knew him. The son-in-law said yes, and it was someone he had had brief contact with in the past. Mu asked, brief contact, and how disappointing between the two of them. But the guy got angry and said he should keep quiet for a while. But suddenly Jan came in, saw this and thought, what's going on here? And why is his uncle in the martial arts hall with a flying dragon? And why is this guy acting so familiar with his uncle? Mu asked him if he was still angry about the situation. The guy replied that if he didn't shut his mouth, he would cut his throat right now. The man turned to Shuren and asked him to calm down for a moment. The guy realized his mistake and replied that he apologized. In fact, the man didn't know what was going on here at that moment, and it seemed to have something to do with that stupid son. And frankly, he would like to kill him and shut the whole thing up before it gets loud. But since his son-in-law is connected to him, there's nothing he can do about it now. The man asked, what exactly is going on here? Why are they making such a noise? Mu bowed and replied that he had apologized. Mu introduced himself and said that he was a security guard working at the Sukyun Pavilion, and he had long heard about Director Yang's valor, his chivalrous spirit, and his unquenchable sense of justice. And he sincerely apologizes for jumping over the walls of his martial arts hall without his permission. However, there's a reason why he had no choice but to do so. Unfortunately, his son, young Master Yang's young master, created a complicated situation with Jing, the owner of that illegal gambling establishment. And this was done in order to distribute a large number of counterfeit tokens throughout Luoyang. Jan was shocked to hear this and asked what he was even talking about. The man realized that it was his stupid son again, and of all things, should he have been involved in his dealings with Jin Jinha? But the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall was the most insignificant among the 10 branches of the Sima clan sect. And the only reason such a low-start sect changed their wealth was because they secretly supported Jin, who was involved in lending and gambling, in exchange for receiving bribes from New York. But he understood that the main family would never tolerate such illegal actions. And if his son-in-law found out about it, he would report it to the family's main disciplinary committee. And now he had to do something to divert his attention. The head turned to her son-in-law and said that he apologized for dragging him into this sect and invited him in. The guy said no, and the sooner they resolved the issue, the better. And besides, while the man may be trash, he's not the kind of person who lies. The head said that he understood and allowed the guard Mu to continue what he was saying. Mu replied that he would explain in detail later. Mu said that at Jin Manor, he had engaged in an affair and just bet with young Master Yang and Master Jin, and he had exchanged the silver he had won in the game for promissory notes. However, when he showed these bills to an acquaintance who was well-versed in valuation, he told him that the bills were counterfeit and were currently in Luoyang. And so he came to the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall to defend his hatred in front of the Lord Magistrate. But young Master Yang and Master Jin were already waiting for him with a group of men. And the next moment, he was so terrified that he had no choice but to climb the wall of the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall to save his life. The son-in-law thought it was funny. Jin Mu was exhausted, afraid of a group of worthless people like them. The leader asked his son if everything the boy said was true. Jan was very scared and answered that no, it was all a lie, and let his father trust him. The son-in-law asked, then why was he there with these people? The head turned to Master Jing and said that he did not know that they had such close ties with Han San. And was the guard telling the truth, he asked. When Jin saw the head's gaze, he realized that it was telling him to take the blame. He immediately fell to his knees and begged the master to forgive him. And it's his fault. He was blinded by greed and did it. And the foreman didn't know anything and was just trying to help him. And now he asked the master to let the wine fall on him alone. Mu watched this spectacle and realized that in fact he was not looking for him, or this Yang. And in fact, now his real target is Chief Yang. It was his fault, and it was his idea. The people standing around saw all this and asked what made Jean do such a thing. And it seems that the Count Master did something. Someone from the crowd asked, "Is this man really COM?" But suddenly a girl came up to them and asked what's going on. Count Master saw that his soul had calmed down and he could put all the blame on Jean. He told Master Mu that Jean seemed to be apologizing and confessing everything. But even though it was shown that Han-san didn't fully understand the situation, as the head of the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall and as a father, he couldn't just let it go. And so he listens to the victim, Guardian Jean. And how does Mr. Mu want to solve this? And he realized that they could solve this with fair compensation and money. The guy thought his son-in-law might think so, but they didn't make a fuss just to get their money back. What is Mu trying to achieve? Mu said he was really impressed by their fair approach to the situation. If he had closed the indemnity for the loss and assured him that it would not happen again, that would have been enough for him. The Count replied that he understood and would return his silver money. But Mu said that was not all. Since they had cheated in the gambling house, according to the traditional punishment, Master Jean and young Master Yang should have their wrists cut off. Jan was very scared and asked, "What is this idiot saying? And who is he talking about that needs to have his wrists cut off?" But Mu shouted that he had not finished speaking yet. But suddenly Shuren suddenly ran after the fugitives and rushed past them like lightning. The guy caught up with them both and told them that by running away they were admitting their guilt. And then he ordered them to return to their places. For he will listen to the guard's report and decide their fate. And if they refuse, he will finish them off here and now. The man replied that everything was fine and that no matter what happened, he would protect her. Mu thanked the guy and said he was afraid he would kill him on the spot. The guy replied that it was a branch of the Sama family, his son-in-law's military office. He just didn't want bloodshed by telling the truth. And if it turns out that he has falsely accused someone, the first thing he will do is take him by the hand. Mu replied to keep this in mind. And then Guy said that he could continue to listen to what Garjean was saying. He realized that if it weren't for his son-in-law, he would have simply killed Garjean and be done with it. Guy told the Garjean to continue. Mu continued his story and said that the truth was that he was in the process of investigating after receiving the request. And the client was given a bill of exchange for a debt that his father allegedly owed, which he didn't know about. And he was forced to pay it back. And the one who brought this bill was none other than Master Jean. And this bill was a high-quality counterfeit. And he was conducting an investigation to find out the forger. And to prove that his client's debt was unjust, he came across a certain Doxum, a well-known counterfeiter in Luoyang. And since he was one of the few who had the skills to create such a flawless forgery, he learned that Doxum had lost his family to those who had a grudge against him. He fell into despair, drowned in alcohol, and died a few years ago. And then he found and interrogated a beggar named Gon, who claimed to be an old friend of Doxum, and told the whole story. And No Chul, who is with them now, was once an old friend of Doxum and hid his secret child, known Han, or more precisely, Yuyan Hong, in the martial arts hall, a flying dragon for protection. The girl herself realized what was going on and was very scared. And since Doxum never took on any apprentices, the only one who could inherit his complex blacksmithing skills was his own child, Yuyan Hong. Then Jin Jun used his connections with the young hero Yang to contact you at the Flying Dragon Martial Arts Hall and forced him to forge promissory notes, which were then distributed in Luoyang. Of course, the forged promissory note his client received was among them. The warrior immediately ordered his men to inspect Yin Hong's room. The servants replied that they would do so immediately. Suddenly, the servants found something and reported it to the chief. And they said that it was hidden in Yin Hong's room, tools used for making, as well as records of transactions from various exchange houses in Luoyang. And there are also bills of exchange and seals. Guy asked his son-in-law if the Flying Dragon Martial Art Hall was in any way involved in Master Jin's crimes. The Count believed that if the main family found out that their martial arts hall was making money through illegal deals in collusion with Master Jin, it would be the end for them. But no matter what happened, he had to break off relations with Master Jin. Mu said that, of course, a great hero like Master Jin of Luoyang Hall would never collude with lowly scoundrels to profit from illegal activities. And since Hall Master Yang would also feel awkward getting involved in such matters, it was better for both sides to quickly end this. The Count thought that if he agreed, it would make it look like Master Jean had acted alone. This arrogant brothel guard dared. The Count asked what guard Jean wanted to do. Mu replied that his demands remained unchanged. The silver must be returned. The hands of those behind the counterfeits must be cut off as punishment. Master Jean was about to burn the promissory note from the martial arts hall right before his eyes. But suddenly someone asked him what he had just said. Mu remembered and said that he would appreciate it if the hall master refrained from visiting the Suyang Pavilion from now on. It would be rather embarrassing to see them there in a professional capacity. The Count got angry and started yelling at Mu, saying that he had been in love with this woman from the very beginning. The warrior asked his son-in-law what he meant by the word woman. The Count replied that no, it was an accident. The Count thought about it and realized that this guy had been working on HVF's orders from the very beginning. But if they were to present it as Master Jing's crime alone, as he said, the Count said he was being too hot-tempered. As he said, the best way to settle the matter was this. Mu immediately thought about it and saw that it was absolutely right. He had no choice but to agree. The player did not agree and asked Master Yin to wait. And he was also falsely accused. The head turned and, fixing its gaze on him, the player immediately shuddered and froze in place. The warrior pulled out his blade and said that now that the truth had been revealed, it was time to carry out the punishment. The player started screaming and asking the young hero Yin to help him. But the warrior took advantage of this moment and cut off his hand. The Count told his son-in-law that he did not need to go to that length. The warrior replied that these people had dragged the family's honor into the mud, and if it were up to him, he would cut off their heads, but out of respect for his son-in-law, he will limit himself to cutting off only the wrist. Cole started screaming that he was wrong. He really was wrong, and he asked them to at least spare Hong. But the warrior was a ruthless man and, coming close to them, immediately cut off his hand. But after that, he decided to take up with the girl and told Cole that if he interfered, he would lose his head. The warrior approached the girl and told her to pay for the shame of her family. He immediately drew his sword to cut off her hand. The girl realized that she was about to lose her arm and closed her eyes in fear. But Mu did not allow him to do this and stopped his attack. Mu said he apologized and suggested Hui to stop there. Hui did not expect this and was shocked.